When you go to sell your house, you hire a real estate agent. Go to do your taxes, you hire a CPA. So when you're trying to figure out what are your options when you're an older person, hiring an expert, an aging life care manager, is really the person who can help you sort through those decisions.
My dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and then a few months later my mother died suddenly. So all of a sudden we had to sort of figure out what next.
We first spoke by phone about what his needs were, what kind of community would work for her and her lifestyle.
Dad had agreed to come to Maryland, but when he got here and he didn't want to stay even a night, that was pretty difficult for me to deal with. The next day, I met with our care manager. She reassured me that this is very normal, and that was a huge help.
We've been doing it for over 30 years, so we bring all of that experience to your situation and really are able to help provide the confidence that we can help you through this.
Jane is my care manager. She checks on me every year. It's really a source of comfort to know there's somebody that's there that is on my side.
I just don't know what we would be doing without them. And it's such a huge resource because they know they've done this so many times.
Once you hire our company, you're not alone. We're here with you through this process, and we'll be with you to the end.
Welcome to Care with Love. For over 10 years, we've been dedicated to providing exceptional in-home care to seniors, bringing peace of mind to their families. With 5 branches in Fairfax, Richmond, Winchester, Fredericksburg, and Washington, D.C., we have over 900 active caregivers, available 24/7, ready to assist you. Our dedicated operations team of 55 full-time employees, including 10 scheduling specialists, ensures smooth operations and can fill shifts within just 4 hours of signing an agreement. Our online training academy ensures that all our caregivers and staff are continuously educated and equipped with the latest skills to provide the highest quality care. Need in-home care? Call us today at 703-935-4070 for a free assessment. At Care with Love, we care because you matter.
So here at Elder Tree, what we do for our clients is we help them with all areas of their life. It can be anything from as mundane as I need you to remove the leaves in our yard, and as complicated as I need to move from the home I've lived in for 45 years into a very complicated medical supportive environment that's able to take care of all aspects of my life. We deal with different family system concerns. We deal with putting different things in place that have to do with finances, that have to do with legal matters, that have to do with many different aspects, social, psychosocial, again, financial, could be anything that you can think of. We will help the client put them in place. Again.
Aging is a fact of life, and we've all learned just how quickly life can change. Maybe you want to age in your own home. Perhaps you want to protect your assets. Maybe it's a combination of these things and more. Goodwin Living at Home was created for just these purposes, to help our members maintain the highest level of health and quality of life while living in their home. With a membership to Goodwin Living at Home, you'll have a partner for life to help you receive quality care if and when you need it, and a financing plan to help cover the costs. Our plans can be adapted no matter where you call home and include affordable alternatives and supplements to long-term care insurance. There's no time like the present to join. It's a gift of a lifetime to you and your loved ones. Learn more at goodwinliving.org or by calling 703-575-5202.
My mother came here on a Tuesday and I never was able to come back in. It was that Tuesday right before the school shut down, everything shut down. It just wasn't a normal transition. The staff here did a lot of extra work. The level of cleaning and everything was just amazing. I feel like the care is very coordinated here. It doesn't involve me at all, There's all kinds of doctors and specialists that are here associated with Sibley. And I'm just so grateful that she's healthy, she's safe. Ironically, even though this is assisted living, I feel that in many ways she's more independent here. COVID is hard, but I can't think of how Grand Oaks could have done it better.
In memory support assisted living at Ingleside at Rock Creek, we are part of a larger life plan community, a nonprofit inspiring in its history and long tradition of caring for older adults.
So the partnership between Levine Music and Ingleside at Rock Creek has been born out of a desire to bring a rich music program to the residents at Ingleside at Rock Creek, mostly with music therapy programming for individuals in the memory support assisted living program, but also to bring a performance series and bring recitals and concert opportunities, music-based lectures and beyond in the future.
We have successfully launched 3 new programs: storytelling conversations, poetry and prose reflections, and field studies in nature, and our art therapy program for those who have enjoyed art in the past or for those who want to try something new. Every day, our memory support programs bring the past to life, validate our residents' curiosity and love of continuous learning.
In the heart of Washington, D.C.'s historic Embassy Row, a new chapter in senior living unfolds. Rooted in timeless elegance, modern comfort, and curated well-being.
The experience starts at our front door when you first walk into our spectacular lobby that invites you into the dining room and the first floor restaurant and pub.
What we like to do is really think out of the box. Classes, educational pieces, lecturers, there's everything you could ever want there. We are very focused on lifelong learning. We are going to surround them with elegance, with comfort, with a sense of fulfillment. There are fireplaces throughout the building. There's a lounge on every floor, a fitness center, a heated saltwater pool, restaurants, outdoor dining.
This new location is a testimony to our commitment to providing an extraordinary lifestyle experience for our residents.
Discover your next chapter at Inspire Embassy Row, where elegance, comfort, and community converge.
At Silver Bridges Consulting, we're here to help you and your loved ones find the ideal senior living community and transition seamlessly by representing your best interest always.
We do this by blending our expansive senior living knowledge with the empathy of having walked in your shoes.
Our approach is hands-on, profoundly personal, and steeped in expertise.
Together, we'll find the place that feels just right. Visit silverbridgesconsulting.com/always to learn more.
We don't have to tell you. This journey is hard and long, and sometimes you need knowledgeable partners to help you along the way, coaching you through tough moments, helping you meet your goals for your loved one, for you and your whole family. Support for aging is here. People who've been there, who personally know the road, and who know how to make this a little bit easier. Come to our Problem Solving for Alzheimer's Care Partner group. Find solutions. Improve this new normal that is, oh, so daily. Whether you're earlier in the process and don't know what you'll face, slogging through the middle, or just wanting some peace. Contact Support for Aging. We are here for you.
Live a lifestyle you'll love. Discover a welcoming community in the heart of Washington, D.C. Whether you're an active senior that's ready to live a more vibrant lifestyle, or you're a family member searching for your loved one's next community offering comfort and safety, the Residences at Thomas Circle is a perfect choice. We provide a wide selection of senior living lifestyle choices, including independent living, assisted living, and memory care, right in the heart of Washington, D.C. Our downtown senior living community empowers residents in Washington, D.C. to live life on their terms. Residents are surrounded by an environment with first-class amenities and local diversions of historic proportions. It's a great time to have a wonderful life with the senior lifestyle community, the Residences at Thomas Circle. We'd love to have you for a tour. Come see us today.
Well, good afternoon, and what a beautiful afternoon it is. I'm Sharon Sellers, the Assistant Director of the Sibley Senior Association, as well as Community Health. It is certainly my great pleasure to welcome you all today to the Sibley Senior Association's annual Sex and Aging Conference. I'm so glad that you can be with us today virtually. I'd like to first thank all of our generous sponsors who provide financial support for our conferences. Aging Well Elder Care, ANCO Investment Company, Elder Tree Care Management Services, Goodwin Living at Home, Grand Oaks Assisted Living, Ingleside, Inspire at Embassy Row, Seabury Resources for Aging, Silver Bridges Consulting, Sunrise Senior Living, Support for Aging, the Fitzgerald of Palisades, the Residences at Thomas Circle. We also have supporter sponsors, and they are Bright Star, Family and Nursing Care, Georgetown Home Care, Home Instead Senior Care, Kensington Bethesda, Seniors Helping Seniors, and Smith Life Home Care. And I also want to thank our team who, whether they're on the screen or behind the screens, have really helped put our Aging on Your Terms, our Sex and Aging conference together. And they are Honora Precourt, who is our former manager of the Sibley Senior Association, Pam Nunez, our program coordinator, Andrea Miranda, the director of community health and the Sibley Senior Association. And our production manager is Brian Curtin, owner of Dynamix Computers, and we certainly couldn't put this on without him. And I have a little fun update you from the Sibley Senior Association. We now have 7 area restaurants that are offering discounts to our members. And as of today, the participating restaurants include Claudia's Table in DC, Dashkin in DC, Gregoria's Trattoria in Bethesda, Lupo Verde Osteria in DC, Lido Pizza on River Road in Bethesda, Max's Best Ice Cream in Bethesda, and Taco Cantina in DC. These are 7 more reasons to join the Sibley Senior Associations. The list of restaurants that I just mentioned is printed on the back of today's program book, and it appears on the cover of our Sibley Senior Association newsletter. So we are about to get started. I do have just a few housekeeping items to review before our first speaker. So today's session is being recorded. We will send you the recording link after the conference. We ask you to please type your questions in the Q&A section. The speakers will answer your questions after their presentations. We will have 2 breaks, one 15-minute break at 1:55 p.m. and then a short 5-minute break at 3:25 p.m. If you'd like to support the Sibley Senior Association financially, the QR code for donations will be posted at the end of the conference. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Fred Wyan. I am delighted to kick off today's session with our first speaker. He is a sexual health educator and former director of communications for the American Sexual Health Association. Mr. Wyan's theme today is safe sex at our age and the truth about STIs. Fred Wyan has been a sexual health educator for nearly 30 years and recently retired as the Director of Communications for the American Sexual Health Association. A former supervisor of the National Herpes and HPV Contact Centers, he oversaw ASHA's HPV and Cervical Cancer Prevention Resource Center, and he edited publications and online content for HPV and related diseases. In his role as ASHA's media liaison, Mr. Wyan developed policy and position statements for the organization. He coordinated all press inquiries and gave expert interviews to journalists seeking background for articles. He has also worked with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in developing updated treatment and counseling guidelines for HPV-associated diseases, and he served as a contributor to the STI section for the revised version of Our Bodies, Ourselves. Mr. Weiland currently serves as a consultant to ASHA with a primary focus on education around sexually transmitted infections. Mr. Wyan will speak for about 30 minutes, and we will have a half an hour of Q&A. And without further ado, Mr. Fred Wyan.
Thank you, Ms. Sellers, for that lovely introduction. I appreciate that. And thank you all for letting me spend some time with you today. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. I get a pop-up saying that participant screen sharing is disabled. Okay. Oh.
Let's see. There you go.
Okay. Thank you so much. All right. All right. I trust you can see my title slide. All right.
Perfect.
Well, Thank you again. I am Fred Wine with the American Sexual Health Association, and I did, in fact, at the end of 2024, I retired as ASHA's Director of Communication. And this is a little bit bittersweet for me because you're probably the last live audience before which I'm ever going to present, at least in this capacity, because the kids who are replacing me, they're going to be doing this kind of stuff going forward. But since today's session was on seniors and sex, they said, Uncle Fred, you can take this. And so Uncle Fred gets trotted out one last time. And this was just so much fun for me to put together. When you work at ASHA, you have a lot of really interesting days. Like when we were working on the slide set, with a checklist, and it was like, okay, so seniors and sexual activity, okay, masturbation, got it. Gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis, female orgasm, yes, often overlooked. Thank you. I'll mention that. Oh, and our condom size and fit guide. We got a download for that, right? Okay, so that's kind of what our work life is like at ASHA, but it's all great fun. And so yeah, let's buckle your seatbelts. Let's go. There you see our lovely logo there. We are the American Sexual Health Association. We do a lot of work primarily around education and advocacy. We were formed in 1914 as part of what was broadly termed the social hygiene movement of the day. And really our first focus was on VD, venereal diseases, as they were called, which of course over time became STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, and now STIs, sexually transmitted infections. You'll hear me sort of toggle back and forth. It all means basically the same thing. The modern term is STI, but I tend to sort of lapse due to muscle memory to STD. But anyway, we started with a big focus on syphilis, and it's sort of amazing in a way because this was 1914. Well, we currently have a grant to work on prevention of congenital syphilis in newborns. So it's kind of interesting. Over a century later, we're still working on a lot of the same issues. We were involved with the military during both World Wars, and the poster you see there is actually a World War II era thing. Again, it's talking about syphilis because they wanted to keep the troops fit to fight, as they say. So this is part of our historical archive. We primarily deal with the public, really educating the lay people. That's our key activity. We don't provide direct clinical or counseling services. So if you have an issue, we don't say to an individual, well, in your case, this is what you should do. But instead, we probably have a resource for whatever it is you're wondering about. We have an article, or we've done an interview with an expert who kind of outlines the scope of the issue and covers common approaches to managing it, that kind of thing. So, and we'll have tips on how to engage with healthcare providers. So that piece of it, really having conversations, is big for us. And I'll come back to that throughout this talk. And we deliver all this through a really diverse array of channels. But of course, most everything these days is digital and is online. So our website is our primary way of people accessing our things, but we're on all the social media channels. We have newsletters you can subscribe to. We even still have some online forums. And as we go through this, I'll sprinkle in some links, and I'll have a page of links at the end, and also a way you could contact me if I just blew through something or you didn't get your question answered. And because we are public facing, but that doesn't mean that we ignore providers. A lot of what we do for providers is designed to facilitate, again, better interactions with patients when they're discussing sensitive topics that can be uncomfortable for providers and patients alike. It's not just a one-sided issue when you're talking about sexual health and all that might entail. Some of the things we'll offer for providers are like patient counseling resources. We did a webinar on stigma and STIs. And we recently did a series of modules, study on your own patient education models, just to, again, help those conversations flow a little more easily and hopefully more productively. Okay. So we like to think of ourselves again as facilitators. And I mentioned that empowering people to have conversations is important to us, regardless as patients and providers, but it's also partners who are in relationships, even parents and kids, when the kids start getting curious and asking questions, and mom and dad may not know how to answer that. So we like to offer people concrete tools to get those talks started and give them some ideas of what to say. But a lot of it really begins with being comfortable and having the right mindset to even have these conversations, and feeling that you can do so effectively. We have a very broad focus on sexual health. So we, as I mentioned, we made our bones in STIs or STDs or VDs back in the day, but we came to realize it's hard to talk about these things in a silo. If you talk about STIs, eventually you're going to talk about sex, and that brings up other questions and concerns. That's really why we have more of a holistic approach. Sometimes we have STI conversations that are really pretty much just about STIs, but frequently other things do come up, and we want to at least be able to direct people to resources to address some of those issues. All right, so my talk today is going to have three main segments: seniors and sexual activity, the challenges they might face, and of course, STIs. So let's just dive right in. We refer often to a survey that was done some years ago with adults from their late 50s to their mid 80s. And it found that the majority of respondents were saying that they were involved in an intimate sexual relationship. And not only that, they considered sexuality to be a really important part of their lives. About half of the folks in the survey said they have some type of issue that makes sex challenging in some way among women. The most prevalent sexual problem was low desire, also difficulty with lubrication, and inability to climax. I told you I was going to get the female orgasm mentioned in there. That's very important, and we don't talk about it enough. Among men, not surprisingly, the most common thing they mentioned was erectile dysfunction. So we have a lot of ED resources, as you might expect. So we know many seniors are having sex, and they tend to say it's pretty important, Still, only a few of them say that they talk with a provider about these challenges to sex. So you can see the disconnect there. It's a very important thing. It's happening pretty frequently, but when bumps in the road come up, it's not so easy to talk about. A few years later, after the initial survey was published, we did our own survey. About 3,000 people from their early 40s to their mid 70s. These folks were in relationships, and at least one partner in the relationship had a sexual health issue that made sex more difficult or less enjoyable. And a lot of the things we found in our survey kind of mirrored what was found in the previous one. Nearly 2/3 of the people agree that their sex life really has a big impact on their overall life satisfaction, but only about 1 in 4 said that they really felt like there was any consistent honesty, frank discussions with their partners about their sex lives when problems come up. So again, there's that disconnect. We like doing this. It's important to us, but not always the easiest thing to talk about. Again, we just keep coming back to that. And I promise I've got some concrete resources on that we'll get to. And it was in our survey, it wasn't just the partners the folks had trouble talking with. They weren't comfortable at all talking with their providers. At least not enough of them were. Fewer than half had ever sought help from a provider or their partner if they were the ones who were dealing with issues. And embarrassment, just not feeling comfortable with those discussions, was the primary barrier. This too is a theme that just keeps coming on and on. When I get to the STI section, I'm going to sound like a broken record in some regards. We just keep coming back to some of these core issues. What is the impact of stigma and shame? It's pretty real. And the thing that maybe concerns me the most is that it can actually impede people from seeking health care, even when they would like to. One example is a survey from Australia a few years ago with women who either delayed or simply canceled visits for cervical cancer screening, things like their pap test or an HPV test to look for the virus that causes most cases of cervical cancer. Even among women who agreed that PAPs and HPV tests are important and who understood how these tests work in preventing the disease, 1 in 4 said they delayed or just canceled altogether simply because these visits are stressful, they're embarrassing, they're not comfortable, you know. And there are plenty of examples of that on the men's side too. You know, conditions are common. People, well, we try and emphasize to people that these conditions are common, but they'll tell us things like, I feel isolated. I'm the only one I know who's dealt with something like this. And we really like to emphasize to them that, like, it's okay for you to talk about this stuff. Your provider has heard this before. You're unlikely to shock them or give them something brand new to think about. And you're not broken or weak or flawed. And whether we're talking with challenges to having sex or enjoying sex, or whether we're talking about somebody with an STI diagnosis, this idea that I'm broken, I'm weak, I'm flawed, I did something wrong, you know, it's so important to really stress that that's not the case at all. And that last bullet point about being sexual, and it's okay. Sometimes people just need to be reminded of that. So this is sort of the way we frame it when we're first talking with people. Sometimes the way we say something and how we position it is almost as important as the actual facts that we're giving out. You really need one to complement the other. So what do we do for seniors? Well, for starters, we show them as being sexual, and not in a cute or quaint way. I hate it when people do that when older people are in intimate relationships. It's really important, we feel, to proactively include not only content for seniors, but to show images of older people in other content we produce that's not expressly for older folks, you know. So like if we're doing pregnancy, well, we're not going to show an 80-year-old, you know, but for STIs, how to talk with your partner about sex, absolutely. We don't want to compartmentalize seniors. Most of a lot of the work we do is around young people because they have the highest STI rates of any group. And of course, we're dealing with prenatal and neonatal issues. But we don't want seniors to become an afterthought or a group that's limited only to things created expressly for them. We do create things expressly for them, but we also think they need to be represented across the spectrum wherever it makes sense to do so. So that's number one. I don't mean for you to read this whole chunk of text. This is actually a screenshot from our website. And the third headline is the most important one here. Think of yourself as a sexual person. This is some of the advice we're giving seniors. I'm going to read a little bit of it to you. Excuse me while I lean in. I'm a senior myself. I can't see the dang screen, but it says society does not do a very good job of acknowledging older individuals as sexual beings. The ability to view yourself as sexy or sexual will help you feel more interested in sex. You might redefine what sex means for you in terms of activities that you enjoy in later years. But what's important is feeling comfortable with your body and your desires and exploring this, either through interaction with another person or by performing solo acts of self-pleasure. Masturbation on the checklist, remember? And then we offer links to things that you can go to. Again, we position it. We're stating just up front. Think of yourself as a sexual person. That's okay. So a little more on how do we respond to this idea that people might want to have sex as they age? We celebrate it. That's headline, the screenshot there, celebrating boomer sexuality. That's actually from our website, from an article we have. And we were very intentional in choosing the word celebrate. It's great to recognize boomer sexuality, to acknowledge it, that's all fine, but we think we should celebrate it. So we very purposefully put that message out there. And I don't want to imply in any of this that we're saying people should have partners or that you must have a partner. There are plenty of people who don't have a partner who may not really want a partner even, and that's okay too. So we're not pushing coupling here. There are, in fact, lots of ways to experience sexuality and sexual pleasure. You don't need a partner. Masturbation is normal. It's healthy. It reduces stress. It might even help you sleep better. This graphic you see there is something we came up with during COVID when we were getting emails and calls and things from people who are like, I'm locked in and I'm horny. What do I do? You know, so we came up with all this kind of stuff here, articles on masturbation, lube, sex toys, and just trying to give people a framework there. I told you it's interesting working in ASHA. This is what we do. But please just take the message from this. We are not in any way diminishing someone who doesn't have a partner. That's perfectly fine if that's what you want. And so we recognize that. All right. So here's another screenshot from a blog. Baby boomers getting older but not giving up on sex. And if you were to click on that blog, you would find discussion and links to all kinds of resources, new challenges as we age, taking care of your sexual health, but also, there we go again, how to talk with your healthcare provider, how to talk with your partner. We really feel like that kind of thing is just so important. So what we do. These are just a couple of quick examples. I may have mentioned in my long-winded introduction that we do videos and podcasts, but if I didn't, we do. We have a whole library on sexual functioning. Here you see one, sexual difficulties, talk about it. That's really geared towards women. And then, of course, myths and facts about ED. So we have so many of these, I just stopped cataloging them. They're on our YouTube channel, which is linked off of our main website, which I will have on my final slide, so you can take a look at that. All right, so we've talked about seniors having sex and that they tend to say it's important. We also talked about some of the challenges. Now we're going to talk about STIs. That is our STI portal, our STI resource center, where you can just read yourself silly on anything you want to know there. So STIs in the US in general are near record highs. There've been some plateau and decrease in the last couple of years. So there's some cautious optimism, but still STI rates are much higher than they have been historically, and even really a lot higher than they were just a decade ago. And you see the graphic here between 2010 and 2022, how STIs increased among seniors. And look at the last bullet there about primary and secondary syphilis rose a whopping 760%. Again, it goes back to our roots. In 1914, we were dealing with syphilis, and I'm dealing with it today. I actually have a grant to deal with congenital syphilis. I think I probably mentioned that, but that's just such a big part of what we still do. So why are STIs surging or at least increasing in seniors? A lot of reasons. Physical reasons such as changes to the vagina, for example, that can disrupt the tissue and increase susceptibility if you're exposed to pathogens like STIs. There's a medical piece of this. I mean, we're living longer, and not only that, our active, healthy years tend to last longer. And along with that, medical science has done a better job of coming up with tools to help us cope with challenges that even a generation ago people didn't have. So we're living longer, we're active longer. We have tools to help us retain our sexual functioning longer. That's a good thing, but you kind of need to think about some of this other stuff we talk about too. And I think also too, a lack of awareness. Not just that seniors aren't always represented as much as they should be in these discussions, but seniors themselves, like of my generation, I think back to my sex ed, it was basically all about pregnancy and not being a jerk in your relationship. And those are great topics to cover. But, for my crew, our worry was an unintended pregnancy, not that we might get the clap while making that happen, and so once pregnancy is no longer on our minds, maybe not so front and center, we tend to ditch the protection and that kind of thing. We just don't. Why do I need this anymore? So that's part of what we fold into our STI resources. We're back to shame and stigma. For every discussion we have on some of the clinical stuff, symptoms, diagnostics, we have at least one and maybe even more on the emotional, the personal side, the relationship piece of it. Especially if somebody is diagnosed with a viral STI for which there's no medical cure. So herpes is usually where we're talking about, this genital herpes. There's a presumed loss of sexual freedom. I mean, nobody's going to want me. Can I even have sex? Which is absolutely not the case, but that's the way people feel. Even some concerns about sexual functioning in some cases. There's a sense that I've done something wrong. People worry about judgment, and that also gets back to here too. It's an impediment to seeking necessary medical services and getting the testing or the follow-up perhaps they need, because they're afraid their medical team might judge them. lots of guilt, and people who are really worried about exposing somebody through casual, non-sexual exposure. Like, for example, people after diagnosis sometimes will reach out to us and like, oh my God, I was at my sister's last weekend and I used the bathroom. Do I have to worry about that? What about if her grandkids come over? People have those kinds of things. And I can tell you, as far as just a quick aside, one of the medical officers at CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, that we used to work with, whenever people would ask her, can you get an STI off of a toilet? She would always say, only if you sit down before the other person gets up. So there you go. So how do we respond? Well, for one thing, we normalize, and what I mean by that is people don't really understand that it's actually quite normal for people to have an STI, even though many of them never know it. If you look just at the human papilloma virus alone, HPV, that's the virus I mentioned that's associated with most cases of cervical cancer, and some types of HPV actually cause genital warts. That virus alone, researchers think 75 to 80% of all sexually active people have at least one HPV infection in their lifetime, even though for most of them it's not dangerous, they never know it, and the immune system more or less clears it on its own. Still, having an STI in general is really, it just means you're normal. It really pretty much means you're human. So we try and use grounding with facts and things like that to just try to, not in a preachy sort of way, but just to sort of give you, well, actually, here's another way to look at this. And also the experiences of others. We have a lot of stuff with folks themselves who have gone through a diagnosis and treatment and follow up and dealing with partners, and they talk about what that was like for them. They have such authentic voices, and sometimes it just means more if you hear from somebody who's going through the same thing. And we love to give people action steps. We love to empower them. For example, finding the right provider. This is a little nugget from our website. This creates a mindset for those who might fear judgment or think that they're the only one of only a few who might be dealing with this issue when they almost certainly are not. This page has a lot more stuff on it, including a clinic locator to actually find a place to go if you need that. But a lot of it is about also establishing the mindset along with the STI information that we provide to people. This one, somebody might call us after they've had a diagnosis, and we try and we have to, they're like, oh my God, and we go back to the same old things. Most people have an STI in their lifetime. It can really happen to anyone. It cuts across all demographics. And another thing is some people will tell us things like, oh, if I only weren't such a slut. It's like, no, it's not really anything to do with being a slut. Anybody can get an STI, regardless, even if they've only had a few partners. It's not a marker of promiscuity. And also the fact that STIs are curable, or at least they tend to be very manageable, probably to a great extent than most people tend to think. That gets back to the whole issue of, well, my sex life is over. Maybe not. Let's talk about it. Probably not. If they're in a new relationship and they really want to just talk about STIs in general, maybe some testing, we give them some talking points about that. You make the conversation about more than just STIs. It's really about sex and sexual health. And it's important to know that STIs are often without symptoms. That's quite common, especially in women. So, you may have symptoms that are noticeable pretty quickly, but it doesn't always work that way. More often than not, its symptoms are really kind of a dodgy way to really determine if somebody has an STI or what exactly is happening. And then just the notion that testing offers a peace of mind. So and these resources, they have this information I just read you, but they also talk about things like body language when you're talking about it. So we really help people model these conversations from start to finish, and even how they hold themselves. We give people lots of prevention resources. This is just so you're aware that they are out there. We call it our prevention toolbox. So take a look at that if you're interested. I mentioned some resources. So, and you can tell from my slide, one of our 20-somethings actually did my slide deck, but I'm the one who kind of came in and tweaked it a little bit. So you can see the plain vanilla slide like this with no styling or graphics. Of course, that's one of mine, but those are our links to the blogs I talked about, and also to our flagship website. And everything I've mentioned is in some way linked off the homepage of the website. And we've got a search bar too. Or you can just email me, and I'll be happy to connect you with any of these things. I'm also happy to take questions when this is over. I'll just say again, I'm not a medical provider, so I really can't give medical advice. So if it's like, hey, somebody has this condition, what should they do? But if you want to ask a question like that, I don't mind actually seeing if I can just pull up something that I can share with you. That's because we've interviewed somebody or we have a video or something on your topic probably. And if I can't do that, or if you don't have time, that we don't have time to get to your question, again, just email me and I will be more than happy to link you over some resources. I bet you I can find something for you. All right, last thing I want to do. I don't know if this is going to work. I'm going to play a video if I can. This is called VD is for Everybody. This was a public service ad we did back at like circa 1972 in the early 70s. And it's really just a gem. I'm going to play it if it works. If you can't hear the sound, let me know. I don't think I can really make it any louder on my end, but let's see how this works.
For everybody, not just for you. Anyone can share VD with someone nice like you. VD for everybody, darling, have no doubt that anyone can get it. That's what it's all about.
If you're curious or confused, get information or a pamphlet at most pharmacies or healthmen. If you need help, see a doctor.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation. I am, so glad you shared information that I know is helpful to all of us. I do want to go over, there's at least one question so far that has been placed in the Q&A, and I certainly encourage everyone else, if you have a question, please go ahead and type a question into the Q&A. But the first question really has to talk about, conversations that we might be having with healthcare providers, and how is it that people can become comfortable to have these conversations and not have feelings of shame and anxiety when talking to a provider about their sexual health?
Yeah, absolutely. And we always say an informed patient is an empowered patient, and that's why we like to get the talking points. I mean, one of I think the crux of our job is to translate the science and medical issues for the lay public in ways that they're not only accessible, but they can actually use. And so we try to make sure that people get the right perspective about what it means to have an STI or sexual health problem, that they are incredibly common and that it's actually natural and normal to have to deal with this, and also to talk about them. Once people start to get an education about something, they get grounded in it and they realize just how prevalent these things are and how normal they are. That alone goes a long way to helping them not feel quite so awkward about these conversations. And also, we provide literally some scripts, like icebreakers, and how to talk about this or talk about that. We have a fact sheet called 10 Things to Ask Your Provider About Sexual Health. And if you really are just tongue-tied and don't know how to say it, you can go get something like that. Again, I'm happy to provide a link to it. So we think it starts with education and information, and then our little gentle nudges about, look, this doesn't mean you're broken. This doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. Just means you're normal. I had a conversation once with a young woman who was just diagnosed with an STI, and she was worried about partners. And I was talking with her about a conversation. I said, and look, it's just important for you to remember, you haven't done anything wrong. And she stopped and She said, thank you. I needed somebody to tell me that.
Yeah, one of the questions is somewhat similar, and that is, how do you start the conversation with your partner about, having an STD and STI? Or what about asking a partner to be tested, but without hurting their feelings? How do you bring up those discussions?
Well, the one about how do you ask a partner to get tested?
Yes.
We encounter this a lot when people are in new relationships. And again, it gets back to one of my points about don't make the conversation just about STIs and testing. You've got a lot to talk about if you're in a new sexual relationship. Boundaries, consent, your fantasies, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, all kinds of things like that. And we would say fold this into that. This is just part of a broader conversation. It's not just an isolated topic. Um, the other thing is we tell people, kind of get your mindset right. Don't think, this is not like some got something to talk about. I know it's not going to be easy, but hear me, it's just really more of a natural flow to it. And a lot of times they'll feed off of your body language and the way that you're approaching it. If you're approaching just sort of matter of fact, I really want to do this for both of us, and make it clear it's about both of you, and it's not just about them. And also, and a common pushback people tell us they get is like, well, my partner, said, well, I don't have anything like that. Why would you think I have something like that? I have nothing's wrong with me. And it's understandable why people would say or think that, but like I mentioned a few minutes ago, STIs are very frequently without symptoms. Anybody can have an STI and not know it. And even when there are symptoms, they can be mild, or they can mimic other common conditions. So it's just really about, you almost have to educate them a bit. This is not about you. It's really about us. It's about all of us. This is just a common thing. And this would just give so much peace of mind. It will help me to relax and enjoy being with you. And we are about to be photobombed by my cat, Sonny. Yeah, I
That's
shut the
adorable.
door, but I didn't lock it, so the little Houdini can open it up. Okay, pal, you go over there. Special guest appearance.
No problem at all. A really quick question. Are the symptoms of STIs different in older adults compared to younger individuals?
I've never really seen anything that there's any radical difference in them. The problem with symptoms and STIs is that they're not always consistent. They're not always of the same intensity or severity. Some people have like with herpes, for example, about 85% of people who have genital herpes don't know it. They've never had an obvious, noticeable, overwhelming outbreak, and they've never been diagnosed. A lot of times when people are diagnosed with herpes, and they'll say, I thought I had some chafing or some jock itch, or I thought it was a yeast infection or something like that. So I think the problem with symptoms is just that there are some tendencies and some things we talk about that are common, and that and with certain STIs you would expect to see certain symptoms, but it doesn't always work quite that neatly. But I don't know that it differs so much by age.
Okay. I have a two-part question. How do vaginal dryness or erectile challenges affect STI prevention strategies? And then, in particular, what about protecting yourself or your partner if you're unable to wear a condom because you can't get an erection?
Boy, those are some good questions. In terms of if you're not able to wear a condom, some couples explore a whole variety of ways they can have sexual pleasure apart from penetrative intercourse. That's certainly probably the standard most of us think about, but there are other ways to have sex. And Sunny's back. There can be like mutual masturbation. Just erotic massages, telling each other your fantasies, things like that. That can be pleasurable too. And you can also look at it as a continuum. When somebody is, if there are some challenges to sex, and you're working on them with a provider, that may take a while to find out the best solution for you, if you are able to. But in the meantime, you can do other things. So we encourage people to really explore and consider your options. Sex doesn't have to just be had one way. There are lots of ways people can be sexual and enjoy each other. And I'm sorry, there was another question about vaginal dryness. Would you tee that one up for me again, if you don't?
Yeah, I was just, I mean, does vaginal dryness, does that present a challenge as we're talking about STI prevention strategies?
I don't know that it changes that unless I mean, one thing about vaginal dryness is we talk a lot about using adequate lubrication, and we do in fact have a fact sheet. Surprise, surprise! You can download all about lubes, about how lubes might be able to help somebody. There are other approaches to therapeutic approaches to vaginal dryness that we would encourage somebody to talk about with their provider, but making sure that you're taking advantage of lubes and using them properly and as you need them would be a start there. I don't know that, and that alone too, if you can help the dryness issue, that will probably help somewhat minimize the risk for STIs, as I talked about, because when there's dryness, there tends to be more disruption of the tissue. You get some micro abrasions, things like that, which just simply open up make one more susceptible to expose to some of the STIs. I don't know if I'm not sure. Maybe some of the other panels can talk about this. I don't know if using a condom with vaginal dryness, maybe a lubricated condom. I don't know how that works together, but I think the first thing is really just figuring out how to address that so that a person's comfortable, and maybe using a condom if that's appropriate. Yeah, maybe a lubricated condom would even help with that.
I'm sure you've been asked this before, but what do you feel are some of the biggest myths about sex and aging?
I think the first one is that old people don't have sex. I think that's one thing when we clearly know that they do. There's not an expiration date on on a person's sex life, and I think that's probably myth number one. I think people just make assumptions about the kinds of health challenges that older people have, when the reality is sexual health challenges, even things like erectile dysfunction, can happen at any age. There are young people who have issues with ED. Sometimes it's physical, other times it can be psychological, can actually play into it as well. So people tend to think that these conditions are just isolated in old people, and maybe old people have a disproportionate share of the burden there, but they're not the only ones dealing with this. And this is why we start talking about this stuff early, just when people are young, because this is something we look at sex across the lifespan.
Where can older adults access confidential and affordable STI testing?
So if you go to any of the clinic locator tools on our website, if you go in any of our testing tabs, you will either see or be directed to a clinic locator. Those are great places to find clinics that are obviously very savvy and tuned into sexual health and STIs. Many of them are free or low cost, not all of them, but there are options. I think you can even use that as a filter if you want to. That is one way to start. But really, even with a primary care provider, you would really expect your provider, if you have a good level of trust in them, to really give you what you need, and they'll do it in a confidential way. One of the issues we run into is that increasingly our providers are a lot younger than we are. And like, even in my own case, my primary care provider is a nurse practitioner who's young enough to be my daughter. It might be a little hard to bring some of these issues up with her if I needed to. It's just, that's just an instinct. I know intellectually, of course, I should be able to talk with her about anything, but I mean, she could literally be my daughter. I mean, that is a hard thing to do. And she's a woman. Of course, I'm going to be a little nervous or maybe intimidated about that. I think even beyond worries about confidentiality, sometimes we're even worried more, especially the provider is very different from us, a lot younger than us. Maybe they're a different sex than us. That can sometimes be complicated a little bit. But I'll say again, there's nothing you're going to throw out that they haven't seen.
What do you say to people who have a belief that condoms aren't necessary after menopause?
Well, we that gets back to an STI discussion and really what a couple wants to do in a relationship. We're very pro condom, but we also don't bludgeon people over the heads with them. They can make their own decisions, and that's what we try to do, is empower them to say, look, just because you're of a certain age, And if you're not worried about pregnancy, there are still STIs out there to think about. And we know that they can happen really across the lifespan. They do happen across the lifespan. And so we just try to offer that perspective. Again, it's gentle. It's meant to be educational rather than coercive. We're not insisting you must do this. But I think, but we do try and get that key message across.
Yeah, I know one of our other panelists is going to touch on this, but I just want to know, do you have any suggestions that you share for persons that are combating, a lack of desire?
That is not my area of expertise, but it all does start with talking with the healthcare provider. It also involves talking with the partner, too. Just being honest and having that connection so that you're kind of feeling each other on this issue that's a problem, because it is a problem, especially for women who frequently talk about that, and they can get very frustrated. And it can also have effects in the relationship that go beyond the bedroom. It can really, it can really cause some stress and tension within the relationship. So here too, have those conversations. What are you comfortable doing sexually? If there's anything, are you willing to explore that? Are you willing to talk to your healthcare provider? But sort of, again, get those conversations started. We do have some material on our website that links to interviews and expert resources that really talks about the array of things one can do about their desire, and I'll be happy to share those.
Okay. I just want to ask you, are you willing to have your presentation shared with our providers? I mean, with our participants?
Of course, absolutely.
Wonderful. All right, then I will make certain that they get those helpful links that you've spoken about. I have at least one other question, and that is, how often should sexually active seniors get tested for STIs?
Fantastic question. There's no one size fits all on that. With the STI test, one should have, and the frequency depends a lot on you. It depends on your exact age. It depends on your sex. Depends on your lifestyle, what your sexual history is like. That's why one of the resources we have for providers how to take a sexual history, because there really is no one size fits all solution to that. It's something we would recommend. If you've never had a conversation about this with your provider, go ahead and have it. Even if you're not in a relationship, you don't think you need it, it's still a good idea to go ahead and have it. It's not a bad idea if you're embarking on a new relationship, or if you've had an unprotected sexual exposure. Of course, at that point, it's probably a good idea to think about testing. Again, talk to the provider to see what they recommend. It may even depend on what type of sex you have, not just that you had sex with. There's a lot of ways to have sex, and depending on what you're doing, that can affect your risk level. So yeah, just keep having those conversations. Start off with it, but certainly if there's a new partner, if there's been a new episode where you didn't use protection, those would be obvious times to talk about it too.
Okay. There may be some healthcare providers with us. What advice do you give healthcare providers in order to create a more comfortable space for older adults to really discuss sexual health?
One thing to do is to initiate it, and don't depend on the patient to necessarily do it. I know probably any provider on this call is pretty much already doing that, but having the provider initiate it, attention to body language is always good. Eye contact, relaxed presence, that kind of thing. If you can have any visuals in your office that show, like, I talked about how representation matters. And even when we're doing content around STIs and sexual health that's not specifically for seniors, we still include seniors in there if it makes sense to do so. Sometimes just seeing a poster that has a senior, when you're talking about STI testing or prevention, that sort of gets the mindset, oh, okay, they're hip to this. This is we're all the same wavelength here. That kind of thing can be huge.
What about some common chronic conditions like diabetes, heart disease? How do they impact sexual health, and do they impact STI risk at all?
they certainly can impact sexual health. They can impact sexual functioning. Incontinence is another one that comes up from time to time. I mean, if you're not healthy, if you're not feeling well, it can just be difficult to get in the mood and to have sex, for one thing. Again, these are not areas where I really have a lot of expertise, so I can't delve too deeply into the many. But sure, I mean, gets back to my conversation about how we can't really look at STIs just in a silo. There's so much else that they interact with, including your overall health. Um, and things like erectile dysfunction, I believe, can actually maybe be suggestive of some other health issues that maybe need to be talked about. So it also there's a big interplay with everything there. I don't know that they really increase STI risk as a rule. That's a specific thing you asked me about, unless perhaps using a condom is maybe a little more difficult, something like that. But they can definitely influence everything, our ability to function physically. I mean, some of those things may make it hard to walk upstairs, much less have a nice, robust round of sex, and they can also just make us maybe feel not so good about ourselves. Maybe we don't feel sexy, we don't feel we may be also have a sense of embarrassment around this thing. Sex and STIs aren't the only thing we feel embarrassed about. We can feel like we're weak or we're broken or we kind of let everybody down if we let some other conditions happen. So sometimes we just don't feel so good about ourselves, and that too can also affect our ability to connect with a partner and have the sex that we'd like to have.
Here's a question. Can medications for erectile dysfunction increase STI risk if perhaps safer sex practices are not being used?
I've never heard that the medications themselves increase STI risk. Again, one of the other speakers may be able to address that in their talk. But of course, if it does, enhance one's ability to have sex, and then they're not aware of STIs and prevention strategies, you can see a connection there. But I'm not sure that about the drugs themselves creating an inherent risk.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to, certainly, thank you for a wonderful presentation. Thank you for agreeing to share your slides, which I will make certain our attendees have access to. Your talk was very thoughtful. Your answers to questions, I think, are going to be very helpful. And sometimes people don't ask questions, in arenas like this. So thank you for sharing your contact information with us in the event that someone does want to reach out to you with a specific question. And again, we are all very thankful for the time that you've spent with us this afternoon. Thank you.
This was a lovely swan song for Uncle Fred. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome, you and your cat. We are going to have a 15-minute break right now. It is 1:29 on my clock. I would say if we come back here by 1:45, we'll be a little ahead of schedule, but that will allow us a 15-minute break right now. So please enjoy a short break. We'll see you back in 15 minutes. And in the meantime, we will be playing a video clip of our patron sponsors during the break. We are so grateful for their financial support.
When you go to sell your house, you hire a real estate agent. Go to do your taxes, you hire a CPA. So when you're trying to figure out what are your options when you're an older person, hiring an expert, an aging life care manager, is really the person who can help you sort through those decisions.
My dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and then a few months later, my mother died suddenly. So all of a sudden, we had to sort of figure out what next.
We first spoke by phone about what his needs were, what kind of community would work for her and her lifestyle.
Dad had agreed to come to Maryland, but when he got here and he didn't want to stay even a night, that was pretty difficult for me to deal with. The next day, I met with our care manager. She reassured me that this is very normal, and that was a huge help.
We've been doing it for over 30 years. So we bring all of that experience to your situation and really are able to help provide the confidence that we can help you through this.
Jane is my care manager. She checks on me every year. It's really a source of comfort, you know, there's somebody that's there that is on my side.
I just don't know what we would be doing without them. And it's such a huge resource because they know they've done this so many times.
Once you hire our company, you're not alone. We're here with you through this process, and we'll be with you to the end.
Welcome to Care with Love. For over 10 years, we've been dedicated to providing exceptional in-home care to seniors, bringing peace of mind to their families. With 5 branches in Fairfax, Richmond, Winchester, Fredericksburg, and Washington, D.C., we have over 900 active caregivers, available 24/7, ready to assist you. Our dedicated operations team of 55 full-time employees, including 10 scheduling specialists, ensures smooth operations and can fill shifts within just 4 hours of signing an agreement. Our online training academy ensures that all our caregivers and staff are continuously educated and equipped with the latest skills to provide the highest quality care. Need in-home care? Call us today at 703-935-4070 for a free assessment. At Care with Love, we care because you matter.
So here at Elder Tree, what we do for our clients is we help them with all areas of their life. It can be anything from as mundane as I need you to remove the leaves in our yard, and as complicated as I need to move from the home I've lived in for 45 years into a very complicated medical supportive environment that's able to take care of all aspects of my life. We deal with different family system concerns. We deal with putting different things in place that have to do with finances, that have to do with legal matters, that have to do with many different aspects, social, psychosocial, again, financial, could be anything that you can think of. We will help the client put them in place. Again.
Aging is a fact of life, and we've all learned just how quickly life can change. Maybe you want to age in your own home. Perhaps you want to protect your assets. Maybe it's a combination of these things and more. Goodwin Living at Home was created for just these purposes, to help our members maintain the highest level of health and quality of life while living in their home. With a membership to Goodwin Living at Home, you'll have a partner for life to help you receive quality care if and when you need it, and a financing plan to help cover the costs. Our plans can be adapted no matter where you call home and include affordable alternatives and supplements to long-term care insurance. There's no time like the present to join. It's a gift of a lifetime to you and your loved ones. Learn more at goodwinliving.org or by calling 703-575-5202.
My mother came here on a Tuesday and I never was able to come back in. It was that Tuesday right before the school shut down, everything shut down. It just wasn't a normal transition. The staff here did a lot of extra work. The level of cleaning and everything was just amazing. I feel like the care is very coordinated here. It doesn't involve me at all. There's all kinds of doctors and specialists that are here associated with Sibley. And I'm just so grateful that she's healthy, she's safe. Ironically, even though this is assisted living, I feel that in many ways she's more independent here. COVID is hard, but I can't think of how Grand Oaks could have done it better.
In memory support assisted living at Ingleside at Rock Creek, we are part of a larger life plan community, a nonprofit inspiring in its history and long tradition of caring for older adults.
So the partnership between Levine Music and Ingleside at Rock Creek has been born out of a desire to bring a rich music program to the residents at Ingleside at Rock Creek, mostly with music therapy programming for individuals in the Memory Support Assisted Living program, but also to bring a performance series and bring recitals and concert opportunities, music-based lectures, and beyond in the future.
We have successfully launched 3 new programs: storytelling conversations, poetry and prose reflections, and field studies in nature, and our art therapy program for those who have enjoyed art in the past or for those who want to try something new. Every day, our memory support programs bring the past to life, validate our residents' curiosity and love of continuous learning.
In the heart of Washington, D.C.'s historic Embassy Row, a new chapter in senior living unfolds. Rooted in timeless elegance, modern comfort, and curated well-being.
The experience starts at our front door when you first walk into our spectacular lobby that invites you into the dining room and the first floor restaurant and pub.
What we like to do is really think out of the box. Classes, educational pieces, lecturers, there's everything you could ever want there. We are very focused on lifelong learning. We are going to surround them with elegance, with comfort, with a sense of fulfillment. There are fireplaces throughout the building. There's a lounge on every floor, a fitness center, a heated saltwater pool, restaurants, outdoor dining.
This new location is a testimony to our commitment to providing an extraordinary lifestyle experience for our residents.
Discover your next chapter at Inspire Embassy Row, where elegance, comfort, and community converge.
At Silver Bridges Consulting, we're here to help you and your loved ones find the ideal senior living community and transition seamlessly by representing your best interest always.
We do this by blending our expansive senior living knowledge with the empathy of having walked in your shoes.
Our approach is hands-on, profoundly personal, and steeped in expertise.
Together, we'll find the place that feels just right. Visit silverbridgesconsulting.com/always to learn more.
We don't have to tell you. This journey is hard and long, and sometimes you need knowledgeable partners to help you along the way, coaching you through tough moments, helping you meet your goals for your loved one, for you and your whole family. Support for Aging is here. People who've been there, who personally know the road, and who know how to make this a little bit easier. Come to our Problem Solving for Alzheimer's Care Partner group. Find solutions. Improve this new normal that is, oh, so daily. Whether you're earlier in the process and don't know what you'll face, slogging through the middle, or just wanting some peace. Contact Support for Aging. We are here for you.
Live a lifestyle you'll love. Discover a welcoming community in the heart of Washington, D.C. Whether you're an active senior that's ready to live a more vibrant lifestyle, or you're a family member searching for your loved one's next community offering comfort and safety, the Residences at Thomas Circle is a perfect choice. We provide a wide selection of senior living lifestyle choices, including independent living, assisted living, and memory care, right in the heart of Washington, D.C. Our downtown senior living community empowers residents in Washington, D.C. to live life on their terms. Residents are surrounded by an environment with first-class amenities and local diversions of historic proportions. It's a great time to have a wonderful life with the senior lifestyle community, the Residences at Thomas Circle. We'd love to have you for a tour. Come see us today.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our second speaker that we are getting ready for. I certainly, again, am so appreciative of all of our sponsors that make it possible for us to have these sessions, particularly this Sex and Aging conference that we do. At this point, our next speaker is going to be Dr. Nadia Serdar. Dr. Nadia, John Hopkins physician and founder of Bethesda Modern Primary Care. Her topic is sex, intimacy, and healthy aging. What changes? What's treatable? For nearly a decade, Dr. Nadia Serdar cared for the sickest patients in the hospital, often meeting them at some of the most vulnerable moments of their lives. And as a board certified internal medicine trained physician at Yale University, Northwestern University, and UT Southwestern Medical Center, she became deeply familiar with complex medical conditions and what happens when preventive care comes too late. After years at Sibley Memorial Hospital caring for critically ill adults, Dr. Serdar chose to shift her focus to the community to help prevent the very hospitalizations she witnessed every day. She founded Bethesda Modern Primary Care, where women in midlife can receive expert expert care. She expert menopause and healthy aging care, early intervention, lifestyle focused medicine, and continual support. Dr. Nadia is going to present her information about sex and healthy aging for an hour, and we will have 15 minutes for Q&A. So thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Nadia. Just want to remind everyone that we definitely want to have your questions. And if you'll submit your questions in the Q&A, that would be extremely helpful to us. This webinar is being recorded, so we will be sending you a link to the webinar with all of the wonderful links and information that all of our speakers have provided. Our speakers also have given us permission to share their slides with you, and I will be making certain that everyone receives a copy of both the slides as well as all of the information that has been provided by our speakers. At the very end of our presentation, we will also be sharing a QR code, and that is in the event if there's anyone here that would like to help support the activities of the Sibley Senior Association. There will be a QR code in which you can make a donation to the Sibley Foundation, which supports our programming. And our next speaker will be joining us momentarily. We're going to go ahead and rerun our video loop for just a few minutes to give our speaker the opportunity to join in.
When you go to sell your house, you hire a real estate agent. Go to do your taxes, you hire a CPA. So when you're trying to figure out what are your options when you're an older person, hiring an expert, an aging life care manager, is really the person who can help you sort through those decisions.
My dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and then a few months later, my mother died suddenly. So all of a sudden, we had to sort of figure out what next.
We first spoke by phone about what his needs were, what kind of community would work for her and her lifestyle.
Dad had agreed to come to Maryland, but when he got here and he didn't want to stay even a night, that was pretty difficult for me to deal with. The next day, I met with our care manager. She reassured me that this is very normal, and that was a huge help.
We've been doing it for over 30 years, so we bring all of that experience to your situation and really are able to help provide the confidence that we can help you through this.
Jane is my care manager. She checks on me every year. It's really a source of comfort to know there's somebody that's there that is on my side.
I just don't know what we would be doing without them. And it's such a huge resource because they know they've done this so many times.
Once you hire our company, you're not alone. We're here with you through this process, and we'll be with you to the end.
Welcome to Care with Love. For over 10 years, we've been dedicated to providing exceptional in-home care to seniors, bringing peace of mind to their families. With 5 branches in Fairfax, Richmond, Winchester, Fredericksburg, and Washington, D.C., we have over 900 active caregivers, available 24/7, ready to assist you. Our dedicated operations team of 55 full-time employees, including 10 scheduling specialists, ensures smooth operations and can fill shifts within just 4 hours of signing an agreement. Our online training academy ensures that all our caregivers and staff are continuously educated and equipped with the latest skills to provide the highest quality care. Need in-home care? Call us today at 703-935-4070 for a free assessment. At Care with Love, we care because you matter.
So here at Elder Tree, what we do for our clients is we help them with all areas of their life. It can be anything from as mundane as I need you to remove the leaves in our yard, and as complicated as I need to move from the home I've lived in for 45 years into a very complicated medical supportive environment that's able to take care of all aspects of my life. We deal with different family system concerns. We deal with putting different things in place that have to do with finances, that have to do with legal matters, that have to do with many different aspects, social, psychosocial, again, financial, could be anything that you can think of. We will help the client put them in place. Again.
Aging is a fact of life, and we've all learned just how quickly life can change. Maybe you want to age in your own home. Perhaps you want to protect your assets. Maybe it's a combination of these things and more. Goodwin Living at Home was created for just these purposes, to help our members maintain the highest level of health and quality of life while living in their home. With a membership to Goodwin Living at Home, you'll have a partner for life to help you receive quality care if and when you need it, and a financing plan to help cover the costs. Our plans can be adapted no matter where you call home and include affordable alternatives and supplements to long-term care insurance. There's no time like the present to join. It's a gift of a lifetime to you and your loved ones. Learn more at goodwinliving.org or by calling 703-575-5202.
My mother came here on a Tuesday and I never was able to come back in. It was that Tuesday right before the school shut down, everything shut down. It just wasn't a normal transition. The staff here did a lot of extra work. The level of cleaning and everything was just amazing. I feel like the care is very coordinated here. It doesn't involve me at all. There's all kinds of doctors and specialists that are here associated with Sibley. And I'm just so grateful that she's healthy, she's safe. Ironically, even though this is assisted living, I feel that in many ways she's more independent here. COVID is hard, but I can't think of how Grand Oaks could have done it better.
In memory support assisted living at Ingleside at Rock Creek, we are part of a larger life plan community, a nonprofit inspiring in its history and long tradition of caring for older adults.
So the partnership between Levine Music and Ingleside at Rock Creek has been born out of a desire to bring a rich music program to the residents at Ingleside at Rock Creek, mostly with music therapy programming for individuals in the memory support assisted living program, but also to bring a performance series and bring recitals and concert opportunities, music-based lectures and beyond in the future.
We have successfully launched 3 new programs: storytelling conversations, poetry and prose reflections, and field studies in nature, and our art therapy program for those who have enjoyed art in the past or for those who want to try something new.
Good afternoon. So glad to welcome you back to our wonderful annual conference, Sex and Aging. We're getting ready to move on to our second speaker right now, and our second speaker is going to be Dr. Nadia.
Hi.
Well, hello, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm just trying to figure out what the best way to show you guys this slide is. Let's see here. I'm just going to make this view. And then can you guys see this? Do you see the slide view or do you see my view?
I think we're seeing the view that you are seeing right now.
Okay, got it. 2 seconds.
No problem. I'm going to introduce you as you're working on that.
Okay.
Our next speaker is Dr. Nadia Sardar. She has her MD and her MPH. She's a Johns Hopkins physician and founder of Bethesda Modern Primary Care. And her topic this afternoon is going to be sex, intimacy, and healthy aging. What changes? What's treatable? So, for nearly a decade, Dr. Nadia has cared for the sickest patients in the hospital, often meeting them at some of the most vulnerable moments in their lives. And I am now seeing that your slides are ready. We are so happy. I've mentioned earlier that you founded Bethesda Modern Primary Care, where women in midlife can receive expert menopause and healthy aging care, early intervention, lifestyle focused medicine, and continued support. Dr. Nadia is going to present her information about sex and healthy aging for an hour, and we will have 15 minutes for Q&A. I certainly encourage you to write your questions in Q&A. And now I want to thank you, Dr. Nadia, for joining us this afternoon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sharon. So as Sharon mentioned, I am Dr. Nadia Sardar. Before founding Bethesda Modern Primary Care, I was a hospitalist at Sibley for about 10 years and really seeing the sickest folks kind of at the end of their disease trajectory. One thing that consistently struck me was kind of how rarely we address sexual health and really how profoundly it affects our dignity, identity, mood, and relationship stability. So I'm hoping today we'll normalize that conversation, give you some practical tools to confidently address sexual dysfunction in older adults. So why does this matter in geriatrics? Sexual health is quality of life. Most adults over the age of 60 remain sexually active, and sexual dysfunction is really common, but often sort of unspoken. In geriatrics, we talk about function, we talk about mobility, cognition, independence, but sexual health is also function. Between 50 and 80% of adults over the age of 60 report ongoing sexual activity, and that includes adults in their 70s and 80s. So if we don't ask, patients will assume that it's inappropriate, that it's inevitable, or worse, that nothing can be done. So all three assumptions are incorrect, and I hope to dispel some of those myths shortly. So learning objectives include by the end of this session, we should review normal sexual changes with aging, identify common contributors in older adults, discuss structured assessments, and review practical management strategies tailored to geriatric patients. So the normal sexual response cycle can be sort of viewed in 5 stages. When we think about sexual function, we think about desire, arousal, the plateau, the orgasm, and the resolution. When we talk about age-related changes, in women especially, menopause is that central physiologic transition, and those common changes that we see on the exam or on the report of review of systems is vaginal atrophy, decreased lubrication, reduced clitoral sensitivity, dyspareunia, which is pain with penetration, and reduced libido. These are physiologic and not necessarily disorders. And testosterone really declines as well, and that can play a role in libido and energy. So in men, there's no abrupt equivalent to menopause. It's more of a gradual testosterone declines over time. We see less reliable erections. We see a need for more stimulation, longer refractory period, reduced ejaculate volume, And studies show that by the age of 80, roughly half of the men have low testosterone levels. But remember, erectile change is common, but erectile disorder is not inevitable. When we talk about the psychological response to aging, a lot of the older patients I see kind of vary widely in how they interpret changes. So we'll start with the positive. Positive adaptation would be, greater intimacy, more privacy, less pregnancy concern, broader definition of sexual pleasure. And so more negative would be things like threat to masculinity, grief about menopause, performance anxiety after illness, and internalized ageism. How a patient interprets physiologic change often determines whether it becomes dysfunction. So when we talk about long-term care places, lots of folks need to be in either assisted living or long-term care. We have to address issues of cognitive impairment, lack of privacy, attitudes of staff who are caring for those individuals, and family discomfort. But it's really important to note here that residents maintain their rights to intimacy. The capacity assessment becomes really critical. So can the patients understand the relationship? Can they appreciate the risks? And can they avoid coercion? So this is a geriatrics ethics issue, but not as well as a medical one, right? When we talk about STDs in older adults, we should not assume that older adults are low risk. So in this population, condom use is low. Most folks have not received formal sexual education. We still see HIV in the adults over 50. So we always sort of as physicians screen based on risk, not necessarily based on age. When we talk about sexual dysfunction in later life, it's almost never a single factor. We talk about vascular issues, neurologic, hormonal, medication-induced, psychiatric, relational, or a combination of any of the above. So when we talk about medical contributors, common geriatric drivers include diabetes, if somebody is suffering from polyneuropathy, peripheral vascular disease, stroke, Parkinson's, COPD, cancer, and chronic pain. But it's important to note, fatigue and functional limitation alone can suppress desire, but these are also things that are going on in the background that we have to ask about and try to address one by one. So some of the frequent offenders that kind of make the biggest difference in my practice are the beta blockers, the thiazides, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which is treatment for depression, antipsychotics, and antiandrogens. If a patient presents with a new sexual dysfunction, our primary goal in primary care is to really review those medications before we jump to labs. So sometimes just adjusting the therapy, either taking a medication off, finding an alternative, or decreasing the dosing can improve function more than adding a new medication. There's also the psychiatric and psychosocial contributors. So depression in later life will often present as loss of libido. There is sometimes grief after partner loss, which is quite common. Performance anxiety is a big one after cardiac events. And body image concerns after surgery or an ostomy placement, we find that to be a concern as well. These are not minor. They're often central drivers, but just to say that we have to be aware of them in primary care, because if we want to make sure that people have full sexual lives, we want to make sure we address all these drivers. One of the common disorders we see is erectile disorder that affects 20 to 40% of men in their 60s and 50 to 70% of men in their 70s and 80s. In older men, it's often vascular and can often be an early marker of systemic endothelial dysfunction. What does that mean? When we think about plaque in our arteries or in our small vessels, that also has to do with the erectile tissue and can affect that. With female disorders, what we often see that's common in older women is female sexual interest or arousal disorder, orgasmic disorder, genitopelvic pain and penetration disorders. Up to 50% of women in their late 60s and 70s report low desire. Dyspareunia, which is pain with penetration postmenopause, is extremely common and often treatable. So the sexual status exam, when we first start, is we include the medical history. I want to review your medications. I want to make sure to screen you for psychiatric issues, make sure you are in a healthy relationship. And then we focus the general exam if it's indicated to look for vaginal atrophy or something that may contribute to pain with penetration. The labs, we look at if hormonal causes are suspected. But really what's most helpful is to include the partner in during the history and not necessarily for the exam, but for the history. A large part of this is clinician comfort. So obviously, if the doctor appears uncomfortable, the patients will shut down. In my practice, I ask directly, are you currently sexually active? Are you satisfied with your sexual function? Have you noticed any changes? And I think in my practice, it's really keeping things open and very sort of neutral helps folks open up and feel more comfortable. In management, we talk about the first step is reassurance. So that can be therapeutic by itself. One thing to normalize is that sexuality in later life is normal. Many patients assume, quote, I'm too old for this or nothing can be done. And that belief alone prevents treatment more than the dysfunction itself. The practical adaptations we talk about include simple interventions, so using lubricants liberally, allowing longer foreplay, modifying positions to reduce exertion, treating pain proactively, and managing chronic disease aggressively. And in this context, small adjustments can really do wonders in restoring function. When we talk about PDE5 inhibitors, like what commonly known as Viagra and their relatives in the pharmaceutical world, it can be very effective in older men, though the response may be reduced. And it's important to warn folks that they cannot be combined with nitrates. They can cause low blood pressure, and you have to monitor for visual changes. Sometimes a daily low dose regimen will improve response more than one that's given kind of before sex. One of the big parts of this is sort of the mental health and sort of psychotherapy component. Sex therapy and CBT approaches have remained effective in older adults. The key differences here in geriatric populations is to address longstanding relationship patterns and make sure to address the chronic illness as we've discussed thus far. Sometimes the sexual issue is relational rather than physiologic, but of course you want to look at all the factors. So when do I refer? I refer when I'm concerned about endocrine disorder. I refer when I'm concerned about a complex cardiovascular risk. If there's any severe psychiatric illness or a concern that their psychiatric meds, if they have more than 2 or 3 on board and they're not well controlled. If there's any marital or relationship discord, and then, of course, if there's issues with capacity and concerns for dementia. So key takeaways here are, most older adults remain sexually interested. Sexual dysfunction is common, but not inevitable. The causes are usually multifactorial, and medication review is really critical. And education and reassurance in this sort of setting are really foundational. Most importantly, if we don't ask, we won't know. In caring for older adults, we really strive to preserve dignity and function and quality of life. Sexual health sits at the intersection of all three. So when we address it openly, we really honor the whole person. The conversation doesn't really end here. We talk about sexual health, heart health, healthy aging, and those sort of deserve ongoing dialogue, and this can be really hard to accomplish in a 15-minute visit. So how I personally educate and empower our community, I have some education on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, and essentially these are short evidence-based conversations for midlife and older adults. If this conversation resonated and you want to continue learning or ask better questions, you can start this dialogue with your own primary care doctor. And if you'd like to follow the work, you're welcome to join us online. Here's my website and some of the social media. And I really wanted to leave this open to questions. Here's my sort of contact information. But there's a plethora of data out there, and I think the most important sort of avenue of learning is question and answer. So if I do have the answers, I will certainly provide them. But if I don't, I'm also happy to look up the latest data and share that with you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Nadia, for this vital information and the good news about aging. I do want to open it up for questions from our audience right now. I'm hoping that if you have questions, please go ahead and feel free to type them in. I'm going to start off with just a question of mine, and that is, how can individuals really reconnect with themselves after either a long period of caregiving or illness? How, yeah, how does one begin to reconnect and perhaps become sexually active again?
So one of the things that's really important is to sort of have somebody who's your kind of confidant or advocate in terms of being able to talk about this, because a lot of the things we talk about with behavior change has to do with putting words to what you want, right?
Sure.
And so, there's a plethora of resources available, whether that's seeking out like psychotherapy, starting to talk about it with your primary care doctor, even just addressing questions like physically, medically, sort of psychologically, are you ready? And then once you've voiced the intention, then it becomes easier to sort of help people achieve that in like a satisfactory way.
What is the easiest way for older adults to really find out about the safe treatments that are available for common concerns like erectile dysfunction or vaginal dryness?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting. I had a whole other set of slides that I ended up not
Mhm.
using on GU syndrome of menopause. And as I'm
Mhm.
sure you know, it's been kind of gotten it's in the limelight quite a bit right now, with the concept that vaginal estrogen is a first line defense against urinary tract infections for women over
Mhm.
60. This is the number one cause of morbidity and mortality in women over 60 and even more over 80. So, from a public health perspective, we say vaginal estrogen is the first line of defense for preventing urinary tract infections. But as it relates to sexual health, the whole point of vaginal estrogen is to create is to prevent atrophy of the tissues. And so, with menopause and with the drop in estrogen, you start to have kind of what atrophy means is that the space between the urethra and the rectum, the vagina, the urethra, rectum, it becomes much smaller. So whatever bacteria is normally colonized there sort of has a very short distance to travel to create an infection. So first perspective is preventing infection, but the second is that if you're going to prevent or treat vaginal atrophy and vaginal dryness, that's step one, right? And then, of course, then there's also the use of like lubricants and other sort of, there's also sort of sexual toys that have really come really far. They're often medical grade that you can use sort of to help. Let's say if someone hasn't been sexually active for a really long time and they want to kind of get back to a place where they feel comfortable, they could use those on their own, and then sort of that would help them feel confident to initiate more intimacy with a partner.
Okay. Are there any specific medications that actually cause sexual dysfunction?
Yeah, so I think I addressed them
Yeah.
here.
Mhm.
There's some beta blockers are a big one.
Right.
SSRIs. But to be honest, there are so many options where the risk profile and the side effect profile is way better. So, for example, one of the older SSRIs, Prozac, is well known to cause a decrease in libido. Even worse offender is paroxetine. You don't see paroxetine on people's list much anymore, but it's nice because we've got Wellbutrin, we've got SNRIs, we've got different sort of categories of medications that can address the depression, address anxiety, but not necessarily have the side effects where you wouldn't be able to have a full sexual performance.
Great. Someone wants to know, do you see men in your practice?
I
And
do. And
okay.
I was going to say I see the best kind of men because I get the men from the women. So I am adult internal medicine trained, and half my practice is men because I think what happens is the women come in and are kind of excited about this new model, have a good experience, and then ask if their husbands can join or their adult sons or actually sometimes it goes the other way around where the I had a an older gentleman join, and then he wanted his daughter and her new husband to join. So that's nice because it's usually word of mouth through family and close friends.
Wonderful. And then the question also was, do you accept, most commercial insurances, or what if someone was, what is the cost of an initial visit, if you might share something like that?
Sure, absolutely. So my model is called direct primary care. Some folks mistake it as concierge medicine. I don't like that word because I come from a public health background, and I think it's really important to make sure that things are accessible. For me to see a smaller group of people in my practice, I have what's called a membership-based model. So that's like a fee that you pay. You can pay annually, semi-annually, or quarterly. And what happens is all of the other orders that I would do, for example, medications, labs, imaging specialists, those are all through your insurance, whatever that is, Medicare, third party, whatever insurance you use. For me personally, I take the membership fee and then there's no copays and there's no other sort of charges. And so for the year, it's about 2,500. For semi-annual, it's 1,500, and then quarterly, it's 750.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Um, I have a question from someone who tends to get UTIs after sex. And as an older adult, the person mentions it gets very painful. How might one prevent this? And are there ways to treat UTIs without antibiotics?
Yeah. So those are two questions. So the first question is the pain after sex has to do with the fact that the tissue that's inside the vault is different than the tissue that's on the outside. And when we talk about the different kinds of tissues, the studies have shown that topical estrogen can help some areas more than others. So vaginal estrogen, when we talk about vaginal estrogen, we talk about sort of the outside, but in the vestibule and sort of in sort of where you have penetration, all the way up to the cervix, that area is actually best served by vaginal estrogen that is inserted, right? So not topical, but necessary, but like inserting a ring that will slowly over time kind of give a certain amount of estrogen to that whole area. So, and in order to help with the pain after sex, that's what helps. And then inevitably, it also helps with the atrophy and the dryness and sort of what causes the UTIs themselves. In terms of preventing UTIs, it's interesting because this is a tough one. So, what I always teach my patients is there's a difference between colonization and infection. So you can test urine any day of the month and you can see bacteria grow there, right? But if there is no if there's no symptoms or physiologic effect, like for older folks, sometimes it's confusion, but other people it may be like burning with urination. If there's no sort of physiologic complaints, having that positive urine culture is not helpful. You do not need to treat that. But if you have somebody who's colonized and now the bacteria is causing trouble, then you have to unfortunately treat with as short a course of antibiotics as possible. And I know a lot of ID doctors have gone back and forth. The pendulum has swung from do you want to do suppressive antibiotics or do you want to just use short term? I personally think short term, the shortest possible, like 3 days, if 5 days max, in that in that short term, but really it's sort of dictated by the urine culture and the resistance patterns. And you just have to be really careful.
What about some of the natural ways that have been spoken of? People will talk about cranberry juice. They'll talk about other things that one might do. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so there is actually data that talks about maybe acidifying your urine, and that acidifying your urine can help create an inhospitable home for the sort of commensal bacteria that likes to hang out there. But in my experience, I think it's helpful, but it really depends on which organisms you're kind of burdened with. I think certain organisms definitely are more sort of victim to the pH changes, and some are not as sort of responsive. So I think acidifying the urine can be quite helpful. I think that it can decrease the recurrence rate, but I don't know if it's necessarily like an all-in-one type of prevention.
Okay. There's another question, and I think it sounds like someone is talking about how do you help your parents to stay connected or to feel even comfortable in sharing anything about what's going well or not going well? How do you speak with your parents?
Me personally, or my patients speaking with their
In general.
um, it's a really good question because one of the things that one of the patterns I see quite often in my clinic is older adults who are coming in with their adult children. And the adult children are the ones that are kind of like the primary in terms of getting them to their appointments and organizing their meds and making sure everything's fine. Not to say that the patient in front of me is not capable, but it's nice to have the helping hand. What I find really helpful is to have that conversation first with my patient one on one, and then to ask the permission to include the adult children in that conversation. So, for example, oftentimes when I was discharging someone from Sibley and they had been in there for a urinary tract infection, based on the new guidelines from the GU syndrome of menopause, I would put all my patients on vaginal estrogen, and I would start that new from discharge when they're going to rehab or going home. And often I would get phone calls or like alarming kind of like pushback from adult children who would say, "My mom is 95. Why are you giving her something for her vagina? This is silly. Like, why are you doing this?" And it was always a really wonderful opportunity for me to educate, because I think that the I think that the options for care for treatment are so much broader and more varied than they ever have been. But I also think that a lot of this is sort of societal kind of perspective on what's normal and not normal about aging. So to give you an idea, and what I often will tell my adult patients and their parents is, in South America and some parts of Northern Europe, when you ask about the frequency of sex above age 50, they'll say like 3, 4, 5 times a week. And that's not an abnormal answer. That is not the case in the United States. And so there is definitely a cultural perspective on how we look at sex, and sex and aging, and also what's feasible, right? So I think I don't know if I answered your question, but I think number one is to look at the primary prevention, making sure that physiologically somebody is doing well. But really, you're not going to be able to get any of those helper resources until you're able to have an open conversation.
Sure. All right, thank you. There's another question, and perhaps if you could explain what the D-mannose supplements are for inhibiting UTI occurrence, and then talk about how you feel about it being a good option.
I'm sorry, what supplements is that?
It's D-mannose.
Oh, dextrose. I
Uh-huh.
actually am not super familiar with that. I can look it up and get back to you. But I don't typically prescribe as a routine sort of supplements to prevent
Okay.
UTIs. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. There's someone who has been diagnosed with a heart condition recently, and how can they best engage in safe sex practices? knowing what their condition may be?
So that's a really good question. So it depends on the severity of the heart condition, right? So if we're talking about something like an arrhythmia, like atrial fibrillation, that has to do with sort of the battery components, the electrical circuit of the heart. And if you're on medications that are anticoagulation to thin the blood, and you are on an antiarrhythmic agent, there's not really high risk of sex there. If you're talking about coronary artery disease, where you're concerned about angina or unstable angina, then that's something that I usually say to talk to the cardiologist about and see, is there something you can do that's protective? The roughest gauge I can say is, how do you feel if you walk a block? Can you walk up a hill? Can you go up a set of stairs? So if you can do that without feeling like you're having those anginal symptoms, usually you are okay to have sex. That's like my general rule. But obviously, if you have a new condition, you always want to talk to your cardiologist, and then you have to be really careful with some of the PDE5 inhibitors, Viagra and such, because they cause vasoconstriction or narrowing of the vessels. And if that's something that is dangerous, then that's not something that is safe.
Oh, can you say that again, just so that the audience hears
So
that?
Viagra causes constriction of the blood vessels, right? And so if, for example, you have a vessel that already has some plaque inside and you're having symptoms from the narrowing of the blood vessel, constricting it further is going to give you further symptoms. So it's contraindicated if you have that particular problem. But if, for example, you have AFib, which is quite common for people over 60, and you're on Eliquis and you're on an antiarrhythmic agent, it's safe because it's not talking about the vessels itself. It's talking about the electrical circuit of the heart, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you. There's a question about any specific suggestions you might have for, combating a lack of desire.
That is such a good question. So there's this word in the literature that's coined responsive desire.
Okay.
And the idea is that you may have a lower libido or even a normal libido, but that you're not necessarily attracted to the person who's in front of you. And I think that kind of points to a lot of different things. One of the largest things we talk about in sort of sexual health in older adults is the quality of the relationship that they're in. Not to say that if you don't desire the person in front of you, you don't love them. That's not the equivalency. It's more that to open the communication to figure out what is it that is impeding your ability to go from sort of being interested to like sort of initiating, right? And there's a lot of there's a lot of sort of speed bumps, but you have to just identify those. Typically, it can be psychological, it can be anxiety, it can be, like I was mentioning, folks that are finishing a treatment with cancer or just had a big surgery, or maybe they're worried about aesthetics. So a lot of this has to do with being open and honest about what it is that's causing the distress so that you can get the help you need to get over it.
Wonderful. I think there's another question, and that has to do with, what role does emotional intimacy play compared to physical intimacy?
That's a really good question. So people can, in all age groups, people can have a very healthy sexual life based on the emotional connection, in the sense that penetrative sex is not the only way to be able to connect in a sexual way. There's lots of examples of people who are not physically able to like perform, the sort of typical penetrative sex that we think about, but you can still bring pleasure to the other person. You can still find ways for intimacy that are outside just the physical. So I think the answer is two-part. One, I don't think you can have the emotional. I don't think you can have the physical without the emotional. But number two, if you're limited by physical, I think you can still have the intimacy.
Okay.
That makes sense.
All right. Are there any particular myths about sex and aging that you would most like to dispel?
That the biggest myth I'd like to dispel is that it's normal to not have sex after a certain age, because that's just a societal construct that's not very healthy, and it's not helpful.
Okay. Um, what about this? You talked a little bit about it, but I know body image and just self-confidence, have to affect intimacy in older adulthood. But what advice do you have to people to just kind of, I don't mean to say loosely get over it, but how do you affect and deal with, when you don't feel as confident as you
Right,
used to do?
right. That's a really good question. I think, like I was mentioning before, sort of the psychological and anxiety provoking parts of
Mhm.
it are one thing. There's definitely ways to alter, I mean, I think you have to see like what you're comfortable with. Is there a way to, dim the lights in the beginning, or is there a way to have a different position that makes you feel more comfortable? I think the problem is, in sort of like a lot of the media or movies or whatever, there's this notion that sex when you're older is just like sex when you're younger, and it's not necessarily, but that doesn't make it less um, satisfactory. It's just that you have to sort of be more adaptive and sort of figure out what works for you. I think a lot of that, honestly, I think a lot of it is A, the relationship itself, but B, just being open and honest about what your insecurities are with your partner, because 9 times out of 10, they're going to tell you, I didn't even notice that.
Sure, sure. Um, I want to ask you this. Do you have any advice for individuals who may be single, widowed, divorced, or just they're now considering dating again, and they're feeling a bit of anxiety with this whole process of dating again?
Right. Um, I think that the anxiety is pretty normal, especially if you are coming out of a relationship that it was much longer term, or maybe you met when you were much younger, and it feels kind of like you're getting back into it with not a lot of experience. Um, I think the number one thing I would say, without sounding crude, is that make sure you understand your own sexuality. So make sure you are able to pay attention to yourself. And if you grew up not kind of being told that, or sort of being open to masturbation and sort of self knowledge, I think that's a really good place to start, because it's kind of hard to ask somebody else to know what to do with you if you don't know what to do with you yourself. And it's something that we don't often talk about. When I ask my patients about their sexual health, I do ask them about self care, and self care also includes that part of your body.
Um, what is it when an older adult goes to their primary care? What are the types of statements they should make, or I mean, how should they be letting their primary care physician
Yeah,
know what their sexual health is about,
yeah.
what is going on in their lives?
No,
Because many times primary care physicians are not going to ask those
they're not.
questions.
They're not going to ask. That's exactly right. So I think the first thing is hopefully you have a relationship with your primary where you're comfortable. Um,
Mhm.
but I think the number one thing is to actually make eye contact and make a statement that says, I would like to talk about my sexual health. And then they're going to look maybe surprised or kind of like have their mouth open because they don't know what to say to that. And then you can start by saying, can we talk about the physical parts of me that we need to look at, and the psychological parts of me that would allow me to have a healthy sex life? Or let me tell you what I've really enjoyed, and let me tell you what's really been bothering me. So I think when you raise the pain points for your physician, or things that they can physically, you need to give discrete points where they have something to start with, right? So if you say, I very much desire my partner, I'm having trouble keeping my erection. Now you've started down like a clinical pathway where you talk about, is it safe for you to be on something like Viagra? Is it safe? Do we have to do some other sort of workup? Is the issue keeping the erection, or is the issue of flaccidity after the erection? So there's all these like clinical pathways you can go down. But what I would encourage patients to do is sort of be comfortable with yourself, just because I think when we're embarrassed, we're not going to ask. But second of all, remember, this is a part of your body. It's not like a separate section. Like this is part of your whole life and your whole body. And so you have the right to ask. And if you just give sort of discrete statements that they can help you with, I think that's what's most helpful.
How does a female older adult approach a doctor to say, I think I want the female Viagra? And I don't think people honestly know what to say, but how do you approach a physician,
Yeah.
with a statement such as that?
Well, so one of the things that's interesting, I had a slide about I can't ever say the name, ospemifene, the pink pill. And
Yeah.
what you can ask about is, well, first, I think it's important to say a statement like, I am wanting a little bit more out of my sexual life, or I am unable to reach orgasm, or I'm concerned about this, and I'd like to explore using this medication to help me. Do you think I might be a candidate? Because I think that honestly, if they don't know, they're probably going to hit the pause button and get back to you. But it's so refreshing, I think, for a physician to get that kind of guidance from their patient, because this is something that's new. And we haven't been, like, I trained 20 years ago. We didn't talk about this. And so it's kind of an evolving conversation with your patient. Granted, maybe the 10-minute conversation is not going to be the best place to start that. If you're worried about not having enough time, I would maybe send a message in the portal like a couple weeks before to say, when I see you for my annual, I was hoping to discuss whether I would be a candidate for this medication or not.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, this has been very, very enlightening, very, very helpful. Dr. Nadia, I just really want to thank you for this vital information and the good news about healthy aging. So we are so appreciative. And I wanted to say, with your permission, may we share your slides with the attendees?
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. Well,
Wonderful.
it's been my absolute pleasure to be here. This would be my first sex and aging talk with an older population. And I have to say, I'm so excited for everyone. I think aging with a full sex life is 1000% everyone's right. And I'm so excited for everybody to thrive.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Well, we're going to take a short break right now. We're going to take a 10-minute break before we go into our next speaker. So let's say at 2:50 we will resume with our final speaker for the afternoon. Thank you so much for being with us, and we will see you back in 10 minutes.
Go to do your taxes, you hire a CPA. So when you're trying to figure out what are your options when you're an older person, hiring an expert, an aging life care manager, is really the person who can help you sort through those decisions.
My dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and then a few months later, my mother died suddenly. So all of a sudden, we had to sort of figure out what next.
We first spoke by phone about what his needs were, what kind of community would work for her and her lifestyle.
Dad had agreed to come to Maryland, but when he got here and he didn't want to stay even a night, that was pretty difficult for me to deal with. The next day, I met with our care manager. She reassured me that this is very normal, and that was a huge help.
We've been doing it for over 30 years. So we bring all of that experience to your situation and really are able to help provide the confidence that we can help you through this.
Jane is my care manager. She checks on me every year. It's really a source of comfort to know there's somebody that's there that is on my side.
I just don't know what we would be doing without them. And it's such a huge resource because they know they've done this so many times.
Once you hire our company, you're not alone. We're here with you through this process, and we'll be with you to the end.
Welcome to Care with Love. For over 10 years, we've been dedicated to providing exceptional in-home care to seniors, bringing peace of mind to their families. With 5 branches in Fairfax, Richmond, Winchester, Fredericksburg, and Washington, D.C., we have over 900 active caregivers, available 24/7, ready to assist you. Our dedicated operations team of 55 full-time employees, including 10 scheduling specialists, ensures smooth operations and can fill shifts within just 4 hours of signing an agreement. Our online training academy ensures that all our caregivers and staff are continuously educated and equipped with the latest skills to provide the highest quality care. Need in-home care? Call us today at 703-935-4070 for a free assessment. At Care with Love, we care because you matter.
So here at Elder Tree, what we do for our clients is we help them with all areas of their life. It can be anything from as mundane as I need you to remove the leaves in our yard, and as complicated as I need to move from the home I've lived in for 45 years into a very complicated medical supportive environment that's able to take care of all aspects of my life. We deal with different family system concerns. We deal with putting different things in place that have to do with finances, that have to do with legal matters, that have to do with many different aspects, social, psychosocial, again, financial, could be anything that you can think of. We will help the client put them in place. Again.
Aging is a fact of life, and we've all learned just how quickly life can change. Maybe you want to age in your own home. Perhaps you want to protect your assets. Maybe it's a combination of these things and more. Goodwin Living at Home was created for just these purposes, to help our members maintain the highest level of health and quality of life while living in their home. With a membership to Goodwin Living at Home, you'll have a partner for life to help you receive quality care if and when you need it, and a financing plan to help cover the costs. Our plans can be adapted no matter where you call home and include affordable alternatives and supplements to long-term care insurance. There's no time like the present to join. It's a gift of a lifetime to you and your loved ones. Learn more at goodwinliving.org or by calling 703-575-5202.
My mother came here on a Tuesday and I never was able to come back in. It was that Tuesday right before the school shut down, everything shut down. It just wasn't a normal transition. The staff here did a lot of extra work. The level of cleaning and everything was just amazing. I feel like the care is very coordinated here. It doesn't involve me at all. There's all kinds of doctors and specialists that are here associated with Sibley. And I'm just so grateful that she's healthy, she's safe. Ironically, even though this is assisted living, I feel that in many ways she's more independent here. COVID is hard, but I can't think of how Grand Oaks could have done it better.
In memory support assisted living at Ingleside at Rock Creek, we are part of a larger life plan community, a nonprofit inspiring in its history and long tradition of caring for older adults.
So the partnership between Levine Music and Ingleside at Rock Creek has been born out of a desire to bring a rich music program to the residents at Ingleside at Rock Creek, mostly with music therapy programming for individuals in the memory support assisted living program, but also to bring a performance series and bring recitals and concert opportunities, music-based lectures and beyond in the future.
We have successfully launched 3 new programs: storytelling conversations, poetry and prose reflections, and field studies in nature, and our art therapy program for those who have enjoyed art in the past or for those who want to try something new. Every day, our memory support programs bring the past to life, validate our residents' curiosity and love of continuous learning.
In the heart of Washington, D.C.'s historic Embassy Row, a new chapter in senior living unfolds. Rooted in timeless elegance, modern comfort, and curated well-being.
The experience starts at our front door when you first walk into our spectacular lobby that invites you into the dining room and the first floor restaurant and pub.
What we like to do is really think out of the box. Classes, educational pieces, lecturers, there's everything you could ever want there. We are very focused on lifelong learning. We are going to surround them with elegance, with comfort, with a sense of fulfillment. There are fireplaces throughout the building. There's a lounge on every floor, a fitness center, a heated saltwater pool, restaurants, outdoor dining.
This new location is a testimony to our commitment to providing an extraordinary lifestyle experience for our residents.
Discover your next chapter at Inspire Embassy Row, where elegance, comfort, and community converge.
At Silver Bridges Consulting, we're here to help you and your loved ones find the ideal senior living community and transition seamlessly by representing your best interest always.
We do this by blending our expansive senior living knowledge with the empathy of having walked in your shoes.
Our approach is hands-on, profoundly personal, and steeped in expertise.
Together, we'll find the place that feels just right. Visit silverbridgesconsulting.com/always to learn more. We don't have to tell you. This journey is hard and long, and sometimes you need knowledgeable partners to help you along the way, coaching you through tough moments, helping you meet your goals for your loved one, for you and your whole family. Support for aging is here. People who've been there, who personally know the road, and who know how to make this a little bit easier. Come to our Problem Solving for Alzheimer's Care Partner group. Find solutions. Improve this new normal that is, oh, so daily. Whether you're earlier in the process and don't know what you'll face, slogging through the middle, or just wanting some peace. Contact Support for Aging. We are here for you.
Welcome back. We are looking forward to our next speaker, Dr. Rufus Spann. Dr. Spann, a certified sex therapist, mental health correspondent and founder of Libido Health, will enlighten us about the chapter no one prepared us for, what it means to reimagine the libido after 50. Dr. Rufus Spann is a certified sex therapist, mental health correspondent, and again, founder of Libido Health, which is an inclusive health and wellness app designed to bridge sexual health and overall wellness. He leads the platform's vision, investment strategy, and content development to drive growth and impact. Previously, Dr. Rufus served as Chief Clinical Officer at Henry Health Hurdle, where he oversaw clinical programs and 30-plus therapists. Dr. Spann began his career as a licensed professional counselor and nationally certified school psychologist. Welcome, Dr. Rufus Spann.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here because we get to talk about something that, one, I have a good background on, but two, you also have a good background on because this is your life and experience that we all experience as human beings. However, when we're going to talk about the libido, oftentimes people don't realize what that really means. And the way I start off is by saying it's that energetic being who we are. So before we dive into all of these slides and all the good stuff that I have for you all, I just want to say this is going to be very interactive. I need your participation. We have a Q&A section. I'm going to turn that into a comment section. There are going to be some opportunities for me to engage with you. And so I am going to ask you, if you don't mind, put something into the Q&A section, which I'm calling the comment section, because I want to know what your thoughts are. Because the way I teach and the way I do things in other parts of my life, I ask my students or my audience to be a part of what I'm talking about. Because the more I hear from you, the more we engage, the more that we as a collective move forward in solidarity. So that's going to be really important. And so thank you, Sharon, for the introduction. I will say that I will start sharing my slides. There'll be probably into the third slide, I will introduce the question. I'll come off of that, see what you all have, and then I'll even share myself and then go back to the slides, and I'll do that maybe one more time. But from here, this is going to be about how society looks at us in context, how we were socialized, even generationally, how we were raised up generationally around looking around sexuality. And then what is it now within our context of who we are, how we deal with our sexuality. And so keep that in mind, because this is where I want you to do retroactive work. I want you to also do some current reflective work. And the more you do that, I think the more you'll connect with this, and then it will help us to just continue to move forward. All right. So preparing what I have for you all, let me put this into a really good slide mode. And so going back to the original slide, bear with me, let me stop here. Let me take this back to my original slide. And hold on. Okay, here we are. Here we go. All right. So understanding desire after 50. This is really important because I think what happens is we're very socialized before a certain age to think about sexuality and sex and pleasure in a very social way. The messages are very clear that young, fun, having sex, understanding pleasure, and being connected to that is socially acceptable and okay, and very desirable for us to see that. As we age, we find that society doesn't give us those same messages. It changes that. As an older person, you should think, act, and believe yourself to be differently. So as a therapist and a sex therapist, I look at things within a social and an emotional context. And then I lean into our friends that are medical professionals to also look at it from the medical model. And so what we're going to do first, I'm going to talk a little bit about libido health very briefly. But what we're going to do from there after that is we're going to talk about what's reclamation. Deconstructing the myths about the libido, because oftentimes people don't know exactly what it is. Sometimes it looks like it's just sex and the actual physical act, when it's actually more than that. There's so many other variables that then help us to understand our libido. We're going to talk about the biological blueprint, the psychological shifting that comes along with that, expanding the map of what that looks like. So that's redefining the menu of pleasure. And then last but not least, the perspective shift. integration, and future framing. And so at the end of this presentation, I'm hoping that the framing of how you look at your sex, pleasure, intimacy, emotions, connections, relationships that you have at this age, there's an opening for different ways of reframing and looking at it, if not hoping that you reconnect with it differently or continue the connection that you already have. So about us, what we're doing now is with Libido Health, we were founded in 2022. We wanted to bridge the gap between sexual health and total wellness. And what we thought is that this expands the lifespan, but we particularly focus on 18 and above. However, we have also put a lot of focus into 50 plus. And the importance of that is that as we continue to age, we don't stop having pleasure, sex, intimacy, sexual thoughts. However, the message that is given to us is that that's not the case. But we want to push back on that narrative. What we offer at Libido Health is that we offer coaching, therapy, medical services. And so coaching, we particularly like health and wellness therapy, sex therapy, mental health therapy, and the medical services, if you wanted to look into erectile dysfunction or anything else, we have those that you can talk to a national medical provider, all secure in our app. And so it's in your own privacy. Right now we are in the DMV and PA, but we're also expanding. So that's just a quick note that as an app and a digital health company, we really want to make sure that you have your own privacy, but that we're also looking at what is national coverage to make sure that you all are supported. Now, getting into the chapter that no one prepared us for, reimagining libido after 50. Let me start off by saying that in puberty and when we were in adolescence, it was very expected that this was what you were going to do. Either you were going to find a relationship, maybe even had sexual intimacy, or even sex at a younger age. You know, we're finding that around 13 or 14, you might find that people are exploring sexually with another person. Prior to that, what we see in research is that masturbation, having that self-pleasure happens even earlier than that, as there's a new level of exploration. And all those things are seen to be a typical part of the life, really, development. And it's a natural biological thing that happens through puberty, secondary features. And so there is this erotic awakening that is okay. It's even encouraged in some ways that this is just a natural part. However, as we start thinking about when you move through your adolescence into emerging adult, 30s and 40s, you know, it's still, there's this socially acceptable idea of what that is. But then when you start to get to your 50s and there's maybe a change in how your body feels, looks, and then how society looks at it, there's a little bit more of trying to move it into a category where it's less seen and heard or even acceptable. And so what we want to do is change that, because oftentimes there is this feeling of shame, guilt, and thinking that there's something wrong with me still desiring pleasure, connection, and intimacy. And there's nothing wrong with that. So as we go through this presentation, we are going to broach and have conversations around the libido, broach and having conversations with society says that is not right with us, and then really deconstruct that and reconstruct it for us so that we can leave out of here with healthy minds around that and healthy pleasure. So my first question for you all is, what did you learn about sex and aging? Like, what was the first messages that you all received? And so this is where you're going to have to go back retroactively and think about what that experience was like. So we're going to take you back to adolescence or maybe even your 20s. What was the experience or what was the image that you saw when it came to sex and aging or adults in midlife or on their sexuality? So I have one question that I'm going to pose to you all, and I'm going to look for you all to put this in the chat. However, there are two questions here. But I wanted to note, as we age, understanding sexuality transform. We need to embrace this evolution. And oftentimes there is a deeper level of intimacy that comes with us as we age, because we have now taken wisdom, we've taken experiences that we may have had sexually with our partners, or we may have just learned from others that have given us this understanding of who we are and what we like and what we don't like. And so with that, there's this richness that we have at this age, and having this richness, we don't want it to go without having an opportunity. So my question is, who modeled sexuality for you in midlife or older adulthood? Totally fine if you also want to answer this other. What messages did you receive growing up about sex after 50? I will kind of throw mine out there just to maybe get you all spirited. I will stop presenting because I do see some Q&A popping up, which is the comment section for me, and I will throw some in there. The messages that I saw that after sex after 50 is that, man, you just don't. I saw at my aunts and uncles and aging folks in my family, you really just didn't have conversations around it. And it's not something that I felt was very an open conversation. And it almost felt very taboo to even presume that my grandmother or my grandfather was having sex, or that there was an idea of pleasure or wanting pleasure. And so as folks were aging, especially in the Southern culture around the Bible Belt, there was just this lack of having the opportunity around those conversations. And so that was one message. The other message is that even in looking at social media or media at the time, you just didn't see a lot of people having the message around sex or sexuality. And so as you start thinking about an arc over time, around the adolescence, teenage years, and into your 20s, you found that the imagery that you saw was that these are these young folks having sex. And you saw young bodies having sex, and you saw them having a great time with their intimacy. But as you look at it as they got older, you see less and less imagery around that, even in music or anything else. It's very young focused, and so did not see a lot of that. So I'm going to stop, take a pause, because I see that we have enough Q&A in there, or the comment section, and I'd like to see what folks are saying. It looks like, okay, all right, some are saying that it was not a topic because of changing in marriage status for their parents. No one modeled that sexuality, and that is very true for oftentimes for many of us, not really having that. And there may even been generationally where one generation, as we think about the silent generation, then we have baby boomers, and then we have Gen X, and you have millennials, then Gen Z and now Alpha. Each one of these generations have been given different messages on what sexuality looks like, how it was displayed, and even how the conversation was. If we think about maybe the silent generation and the baby boomers, conversation around sex was definitely more taboo, and it was not something that was probably fielded into conversations. As you start moving into more Gen X and millennials, those conversations were opened up because there was still even more of a liberation around having those conversations in spaces that were more common. So movies, yes, movies is where we definitely see people talking more about it or displaying it, depending on how graphic it gets. I will even note in pornography. As a sex therapist, I have to talk about, like, even in pornography, we don't even find there, you find older bodies and older folks having sex and sexual pleasure. So all across the board, when we think about imagery, we're just not seeing it. And oftentimes, if we do see it, the way that it is displayed around sexual health, sexuality, it is not pretty much displayed in a way that is normalized, but almost, oh, that's cute. Or, oh, I don't like to see that. I don't want to think about my grandparent or my parent having sex or pleasure. If it appeared as if you aged in sex because they were not images of older adults in sex, yes. Thinking about being how it may look or how it appears within age. So thank you all for posting in that and chiming in. If I missed one, I apologize. I do see on old TV shows where young demonstrated married folks. And so seeing that marriage culture was the culture around that. And so not seeing sex outside of marriage. And even if you did see those images in older shows, they were sleeping in separate beds. So all that information really wasn't displayed in a way that encouraged having types of sexuality. Now, what I will say is that you all can also hopefully see the chat. And if we are able to come back, we can pop in some more. But I will leave that there as context for us to have more of the conversation. But I do like where even what's noted, like if you're thinking about sex and even talking about sex in a certain way, it could even seem like an addiction, like how this person thinks and wants sex. So there was another note in here, who modeled sex for you? And I sat with it for a while, and I had to think, like, what imagery have I seen outside of maybe my parents or anybody in my life who modeled sex and sexuality at an older age? The one person I can think about, and I don't know if you all have ever seen Golden Girls, it's Blanche Devereaux. And even at a younger age, and kind of as Golden Girls were still playing, even in reruns, if you will, I never noticed how important her role was to bring in sexuality at an older age. Even though there was some fun that was taken from it, there was humor, slapstick comedy, there still was an intentionality to show that this older woman was still having the vitality, virality around sexual health and normalizing it and making it okay to think about it like that. And I bring that up because how important it is for us to see these images and to push back against a narrative that says it's not the case. So when we think about cultural narrative of decline, and this is particularly thinking about like, this is what happens past a certain age, we stop thinking about sexual health in a very positive narrative. And so what we want to do is dispel those narratives that are out there. Libido peaks at 20 to 30. That is definitely not the case. It could go beyond that. Men peak at a higher age. Women can even go beyond that. When you think about the virality around libido, I think oftentimes we think, oh, because the body itself may not look appealing to those that look for a particular physique, they're thinking that, okay, well, your decline should be there at this point after 30. You should be less about sexual health or less about sex and more about maybe just thinking about emotional intimacy and companionship. Yeah, those things are fine. But at the same time, if you still want to have pleasure in sex, it is okay. And we want to also think about how you stay healthy during that process, but it's still there. Men lose virality, women become invisible. No, that's not the case either. Your beauty is at any age, and your virality can be at any age as well. Now, as each body changes and we age differently, there's going to be a point where you are going to notice that things are changing. But what we don't want to say is that there's just this stop that needs to happen at a particular age. And then last but not least, let's explore some frameworks. It's the second sex, aging women, invisibility, and come as you are. The come as you are, when there is a scientific understanding on one, we need to think about turning the ons on and the offs off. Meaning that if I have a perception or thinking about myself when it comes to sexuality, I might also be putting blockers in there for me to connect with somebody mentally and emotionally. Judgment of ourselves, shaming of ourselves, what society says, can prevent us from totally connecting into our own libido. And so let's look at what it means to look at our libido through a context. And when we look at libido, it's a sexual energy. It's the energy that we have within ourselves. There are things that impact our libido. It could be nutrition. It could be our sleep. It could be self-image. It could be psychological safety, emotional connection, neurological signaling like dopamine, oxytocin, hormonal interplay. And so when people talk about the libido, it's not just one thing. And it's not just something that comes to you and it just stays with you at a certain state. Sometimes you have a high libido, and you can have a high libido at an older age, middle age, younger age, and it may stay high. And it may be a high virality for you, and that's great. And then for others, it may be low. And there's nothing wrong with saying that my libido on a scale from 1 to 10 is maybe 2. It just means that that's how your sexual energy is, that's how you desire sex, and how you have intimacy. So oftentimes with my clients, I'll ask them on a scale from 1 to 10, where do you feel like your libido is at? And they may say 8. And I may say, okay, that's great. You know, what makes you say 8? Why do you feel like your libido is at an 8? And then others, they may say they're at a 2. But one thing I try to do is get people to normalize what it means to have a 2 or an 8 and to think about their libido. And then I also ask questions. What do you feel like is maybe impacting your ability to engage in sex, to find sex desirable, to find somebody else desirable? And oftentimes we talk about, hey, I'm having issues with stress, or I'm having issues with desire or desiring myself. I don't feel desirable based on my own image. But let's talk about what it is in understanding libido at 50 and beyond. It moves from feeling like an urgent sense of sensation. And when I say urgent, oftentimes what happens is when we're younger, it's not hard to get us revved up and ready to go. You oftentimes can just be able to find yourself stimulated to have sex and intimacy. But we move from the urgent to more intentional as we get older. And the reason for that is based on wisdom, based on interactions, based on just what we desire and what we don't desire. At this stage and age in life, we're realizing what we find pleasurable, what makes us happy, but also knowing what our body has the ability to do. We're in tune with if this is painful to us, if we're in tune with my body just does not perform the same way that it used to. And also being intentional about voicing and having our concerns out there. There's also social context that comes along with that. Sometimes we have it where we have families or we're having grandkids and we're thinking about, okay, how am I able maybe to host? I may not have the space that I used to have. I may not be living alone as a 20-year-old living in New York City. I might be living in a communal space. I might be in a space where I'm living with my grandkids or my kids. And so all that changes. Spontaneous does go to contextual as you're thinking more about what is the context of me connecting with somebody? What does this mean for long term? And at the same time, I don't want to take away and say like, this is the norm for everybody. Sometimes it is spontaneous. Sometimes you do want spontaneous sex. Sometimes it's spontaneous connection. And then last but not least, performance drive to meaning drive. And so again, when we think about the adolescent going into 20s, there's just this reproduction, there's this natural ovulation period that happens within ourselves and wanting to have an orgasm, have an ejaculation, have a connection. And then looking for less of like, okay, I need to have sex or sexual context or self-pleasure, and looking more for what is the connection and connection within that actual pleasure. So there are changes that happen for men and women, and this is those that are self-identified biologically as women. And so what happens with them? We know that there is changes within estrogen and the decline effects around the vaginal elasticity and lubrication. We heard that in other presentations. Oftentimes when I do sex therapy with my older clients, I do find that they are talking about penetration, lubrication, pelvic floor pain, and how to navigate through those spaces. I think it was already mentioned before, like what are the alternatives to penetrative sex? I will note this and it will come up again. You don't always have to have penetrative sex to have sex. That's one of the things I try to get my clients to shift away from, thinking that, okay, to have sex, it needs to be penetrative sex. And that's not always the case. You might find that the places that are penetrative sex for that you normally had sex that way, you're not able to. And there may be pain and there may be changes that are going on in your body. And so we want to respect that, because if you feel pain, that is your body signaling that something is not right. And you want to listen to your body and make sure that you're respecting that process. And oftentimes as we age, our body will then continue to age as we get older. And also we notice that what we can used to do, we may not be able to do anymore. And so we have to think, how do we then still enjoy pleasure in sex, but do it differently if we have to? And then also changing in our sleep patterns. As we age, if we're in retirement, maybe we're not getting up and going to work anymore. We've been in retirement for a while. And so even our change in our sleeping and wake patterns have changed. Sometimes staying up later till like 2 or 3 in the morning and maybe on the iPad or maybe watching an old Western. But what I will note is that even with the change in your sleep patterns, you may not be getting the same amount of sleep. Or maybe you're getting more sleep. But each one of those things can also impact your libido, because sleep in itself and making sure that you aren't sleep deprived also lets your body be, one, well rested and in the mood. Sometimes if you're just sleep deprived, you're not in the mood, or maybe if you're getting too much sleep and you're feeling groggy. All that can impact your libido. A couple of things that I'll note as a medical model, and because I'm not a medical practitioner, I will not dive into it as much, but I will say some of these things come up in sex therapy in general. One, when we think about pelvic floor therapy, if I find a client coming in as a sex therapist and they're talking about pelvic floor pain, I will refer them to a pelvic floor pain specialist. And a lot of medical practices do work with that, but you want to find somebody that's really specialized in that. Other time, I find that if we're talking about not finding the vaginal canal being as lubricated as before, looking at what lubrications work well to maybe best fit for you. And then often estrogen and testosterone also come into play, and me being very conscious of that. What we're going to do now is we are going to switch from talking about what are the impacts, the libido for women and just medically in the body, to what happens for men. And so there are several biological shifts that can impact the libido. And oftentimes we think about like in erectile unpredictability and the common factors that come along with that. I also want to look at it as we talk about erectile dysfunction. Oftentimes we'll say like the blue pill, and we're going to go over to medication or medical model. I'd like to say there's several other factors that do impact your ability to have an erection. And I think we've already talked about it. Dr. Sadir mentioned like, okay, one, how is your blood flow? Another one is sometimes when I talk about secondary kind of like diabetes, When that comes into play, again, that can also impact your ability to keep an erection. And so sometimes I'll talk to my clients in sex therapy about how is your eating habits? How is your health? Taking care of your health and your eating habits is very important. But what we notice that as we continue to age, sometimes we're not as physically engaged as we used to be. You know, sometimes we're not going to the gym, we're not getting out, we're not walking. And then sometimes we are. So I don't want it to seem like we're firmly set into one picture or dynamic. But what I would strongly suggest is that if you're able to still move your body in ways that feel good to you, and you get out there and exercise, get the blood flow going, being connected to eating healthy and healthy foods, as I said, nutrition and exercise can impact the libido, I would strongly encourage that if you still have the ability or whatever's in your ability. So oftentimes there is a gradual decline. There's a decline in your testosterone, a decline in your ability to have erection variability, and then there's also the cardiovascular health that comes along with that. So medical support that can come along, as you've already probably know, we talk about erectile dysfunction medication, hormone evaluation, stress reduction, and cardiovascular health management. So for stress reduction, as a certified sex therapist, I'm always going there first just to see, like, how is your life? Like, if you are maybe still working, you know, how is your work environment, or how is your life in general? Or maybe I'll even ask, like, what are the social political factors that may be going on in your life? Because stress has a major impact on your ability to feel connected to your libido, or even feeling connected to sex. I also find that what else happens with feeling connected to sex, if you might be feeling anxious or depressed. And we've already talked about like SSRIs and other medication that may impact our ability to feel very connected to our sexual libido. So I may even inquire, are you on those types of medication, either prescribed by a general practitioner or psychiatrist? And have they talked to you about how that may impact your ability to feel connected to your libido? Now, we've already heard from Dr. Severe and from other folks that also look into the other medications. But with those medications, I would encourage, ask your doctor about how these medications may impact my ability to have sexual pleasure or sexual mood. And they should be able to walk you through it. If not, hopefully they will take a time to look into it and get back to you. But in those conversations, I encourage you all, when you're talking to your general practitioner or whoever that medical professional is in your life, to ask these questions, because this is your opportunity. That's what they're there for. They're there to talk to you about it. And oftentimes in that space, we forget how important it is to have those conversations. And I think that's where the encouragement starts. So as you go back to your medical doctor, as you're going to maybe even your psychiatrist, bring up the conversations, because as a sex therapist, as we're talking about social emotional and all the other factors, I'm encouraging that you talk to a medical professional about the medical model. So the nervous system and desire is definitely a part of a nervous system event. If you're having chronic stress, as I mentioned before, it can suppress arousal. And so going back and like turning the ons on and the offs, that sexual desire. Emily Vygotsky talks about, like, if we're not in the mood, there could be several things that are blocking that. And so oftentimes, as I think for older adults, as maybe you're going through retirement, or maybe your finances have changed because now you're living off of a retirement check, or you're transitioning into different spaces in your life, that in itself could be a stressor for you. So I would say examine how your life is now. What are some of the stressors that you find happening in your life? How do you feel like those stressors may be impacting how you engage with yourself, with pleasure, or sexually? Or are there things that are happening maybe social politically, or maybe how you're transitioning in life, and even thinking about how I move through medical concerns, or how I transition and how I'm transitioning in life? All those things can have an impact on how your life and stress. The other thing I would say is that generationally, each one of our generations have gone through different levels of trauma. And there is trauma that we experience at an individual level. Trauma itself can have an impact in our life, but we can also find that sometimes trauma stays with us. So there's this whole book out there that the body keeps the score. And within this concept is that our body, our nervous system, keeps trauma and can hold on to trauma. And there may be experiences that we have with partners in our life and or events or sexual positions or sexual ideas that come around trauma. I'll give you an example. Religion itself can be a trauma for some folks. You might have had a religious experience where it was very taboo to have a certain sexual experience or to talk about sex. And you still may be carrying that. It may be around shame, maybe around guilt, or maybe you had trauma throughout your life, maybe with a sexual interaction, or maybe you had pain during vaginismus, or there was pelvic floor pain, or maybe there was an embarrassment on not having an erection. And so whatever that might be, that still may be carried with you. I find that sex therapy can be very helpful for that, or mental health therapy, or maybe even talking to your sexual partner. I've dealt with some trauma. There's some things that I'm still experiencing. I would like to talk about that so that I'm not losing out on a great experience, but at the same time, I am not imposing something on our sexual experience without addressing it. Find some space to deal with the trauma. Find the space to deal with the stress. There are techniques that you could do that maybe could be helpful for you. I find that sometimes finding yourself relaxing before maybe intercourse, relaxing before self-pleasure. I find that the other caveat, if you're not relaxing before having that sexual intimacy or sexual engagement or penetration, some people use sex as a way to address stress or trauma. And so we see an adverse effect to that. You might find that there is a hypersexuality. You might have a high libido. And oftentimes what that is that we're looking for that dopamine, we're looking for that opportunity to address other places in ourselves or in our life that hasn't been addressed. And so I would say that is a other way of looking at it, that sometimes we use sex in a way that it helps us to address the stress and other things in our life. So keep that in mind. So going into spontaneous versus responsive desire. So many people expect the desire to just show up. And we've already heard from the last two presentations, that's not always going to be the case. Maybe when we were younger, it didn't take much for us to be highly stimulated, highly ready to have penetrative sex or an erection, or just to feel lubricated and ready to enjoy our sexual interactions. I find as I talk to those that are like the arc of like 30 and up, even 20s, I find that there needs to be some other connection, some other touch that needs to come into play. And so, for an example, it may not be the spontaneous desire that happens. Sometimes it needs to be a caress. Sometimes it has to be a touch. Sometimes you do need the mood to be set. Some sexual stimulation, maybe you need the opportunity to have the candle lit or to even have mental connection. And so when that happens, sometimes there's feeling like, why can't it just be natural or typical the way it was? And the reason for that is that the body continues to change. And there's almost a grieving and letting go of what our body used to do and our capabilities to what it can do now. And so as we think about that, figure out what works for you. And we're going to talk about that because there might be some spaces in your life or places in your body that you can find that. For an example, there are certain places on our bodies that are considered erogenous zones. So for some, the erogenous zone is the nape of the neck. Maybe it's the caress of the hand. Maybe it's the thigh and the rubbing on that. Maybe it's a massage on the back. Sometimes it does take a little bit longer. And I would say as you are with your sexual partners or even just with yourself, give yourself the grace and to remember that what used to be little to no time may take a little bit longer. And or maybe it still takes little to no time, but maybe your partner takes a little bit longer. And they may be dealing with the trauma around that or the grief or the feeling of shame. And if we're able to support ourselves and give ourselves grace, and we can do that with our partners, over time we learn to maybe shift what we thought or think or the messages that we were given to what is actually and how do we work through it. So let's look at how grief and pathology and looking at it as a transition. So in midlife, libido shifts can evoke grief of a youthful body. So grieving on, my body, I used to be limber, I used to be able to get into all these sexual positions. My body used to accept this kind of sexual play, and I can't do it no longer. Fear of no longer being desirable. You know, maybe you were that hot person that could just walk into the club. Maybe you could just walk down the street. Somebody's like, yeah, you are the it person. And now society, and maybe even amongst our peers, we don't feel that way. We're not getting the same attention. And so there is a grieving of that. It's a grieving of the feeling of, I am not that youthful person. I'm not feeling the same way. And so there is an internal experience that happens that can manifest itself behaviorally. And so as a sex therapist, I look at that. I look at the cognitive, I look at the behavioral and how it manifests and shows up, and talk about what that grief and loss process is, and understanding how that shows up in our sex, how it shows up with our partners, and how it may even show up romantically in our relationships and in our ability to engage others. So this is the second part of pause that I wanted to have with the group. And my question to you all is, what part of your sexual identity feels different now? So I want you all to reflect and think about it as a broad context. And not to say that it just has to be sexual, but a broader context of what feels right about sexual identity and feels different now about that. So that might be in the Q&A section as you put something in the comment section about how you feel different. That could be, well, you know, I don't feel as spontaneous about my sex, and that feels different now. Or I don't feel as sexual, and that's something that feels different now. Or my libido has decreased, and that's something that is different now. But I would say just think about that if you're willing to put something in the Q&A section, in the comment section. What part of your sexual identity feels different now? Okay. All right. So I'm going to check the Q&A section. All right. So my sexuality, I appreciate this, more about being enlightened. Libido has decreased. Yeah, I can totally understand that. And you might find it could increase again, but right now feeling decreased about it. Totally understand. Unable to have that erection. And so there's so many things that we can do in talking about as we think about pleasure, self-pleasure, working through our enjoying ourselves through using our penis or using our vagina, our vulva, as we move through these different parts of our sex. Yes. So, when we think about the medical experiences that we have, this could be from chronic medical conditions to maybe even a more recent surgery, like maybe you had knee surgery. And so positioning or maybe healing time, or even the fear. Maybe your fear is that I can't put the same weight or stress on my hip that I used to. Maybe I don't feel as limber, or I don't know if I can still have sex the way that I want. And again, all these things really do change on how we see sex and our virility, and or sex and pleasure, or how we want to identify with that. I appreciate you all at least connecting with this and thinking about it, because one thing I would encourage is do a reflective moment. Think about, if I am going through this medical experience, what does that mean for sex and continued sex beyond this? Am I able to still find places of stimulation, pleasure? Am I still able to find maybe what does help me have an orgasm? Or do I talk to my medical professional, as we talked about the heart and heart health? What the medical doctor says, no, you're cleared for that. That's okay. Or the medical doctor may say, hey, you might want to think about that. I can't tell you how often when I work with my couples or I work with individuals, they will let me know, like, hey, I just had a recent surgery and I'm dealing with long-term COVID, or something may be coming up. And we have to think about, sometimes even the partner is nervous and scared to have sex with their partner that is going through the medical model. I find that what we generally do is talk about what's being experienced right now. What is the fear? What is the trauma? What is the grief? What is the sadness? And oftentimes what I find is the grief is that my body just doesn't function the way that it used to. I'm not the same that I used to be. And I notice that my partner doesn't have that same intimacy or sex as we used to have. What I would say is that talk about it. Have conversations, maybe even see a sex therapist or therapist on how to navigate that. But there's nothing wrong with saying, like, through my social emotional, I am dealing with that. The other thing I see is somebody say not happy about the body anymore. That happens. The body, it changes all the time. And as we get older, society also gives us message on what is beauty standards. particularly here in America, as we think about like what are the standards that we set, the imaging that we have from movies, music, social media, and models. There's so many messages that talk about our body, but then also how we may feel about our body through surgery, through accidents, through life. And all those things really do have a major impact on how we're able to connect with ourselves. I would say love those parts of your body, and I know that's easier said than done. There might have to be places where you reconnect with that. There are people that do body work all the time in helping us to appreciate it. There are times where sometimes we just have to stand in our nakedness and look at who we are and appreciate the bodies that we do have. But what I would say is, again, if you're finding that like, hey, I need to talk through this, I'm feeling some deep emotional problems or deep emotional trauma, or just even just wanting to have conversations, if you're not having that with your friends or a loved one or somebody that can share that space with you, yes, talk to a therapist, talk to somebody about that. I can understand that. I see the fear to talk about using sex in the words. There's a lot of shaming, but then there's also this level of gatekeeping that comes along with it. As we age, to use terminology like penis or I'm having sex, the reaction sometimes that we get from folks, even from our own peers, it's like, I can't believe you're actually having those kind of conversations. Now, as a sex therapist, it's become a lot easier for me because I know it's a part of my profession, but I can see how other people, it can be a major challenge. I would say find those spaces. I am so thankful that the Sibley Senior Association actually has these kinds of conversation, that we unequivocally are having a conference all about sex and aging. And they're having series of conversations like this where we can have spaces to talk about this. And so I'm glad that there's a champion in this space. And so if you're not able to have it in other spaces, I think you can have it here. And I would say continue to have it. The long-term couples may face predictability, unspoken resentment, caregiving, stress, and avoidance. And so, as I mentioned before, I've worked with couples where as they age, there is the changes in the body and changes in desire and even changes how they look at each other. Maybe they're not desiring each other the same. And there is an evolution of how they have to reconnect. They still have the loyalty, they still have the partnership, but maybe the sex is not the same. They haven't had sex in a while, and there could be some resentment on not having that sexual connection. Again, this is where you want to have the conversations. There might be your partner is feeling like, hey, society or me or my ability has changed, and you're not effectively talking about that. You have the silent conversations with yourself. You know that that's happening, but you're not having open conversations with your partner or your sexual partners, because it doesn't have to be a monogamous situation. It could be that you're just having sex with others spontaneously or naturally. You want to think through that as your partner or whoever you may have been sexually intimate with or those that are in your life. Things change, and I think that long-term relationship or whoever that might be, having those conversations, I think it's the vulnerability, as it's mentioned here. The vulnerability that you can have with yourself and admitting that, hey, I do feel some kind of way about how my body has changed or my performance, or that I have low desire and my partner still has a very high libido. And I feel some kind of way that I'm not able to be able to the one that pleasures him. And I'm nervous about that. I'm nervous, are they going to seek somebody else? I'm nervous if they're going to want me to continue to perform when I can't. Or the other way around. I'm nervous that my partner is not able to keep up with my libido. And I'm still wanting to have certain pleasures. I find that when I talk to couples and that comes up, oftentimes penetration is like the number one thing. Like, how do we still have penetrative sex? And I'm not able to have that. There are things that you can do that don't involve penetrative sex, but you can simulate what is very close to penetrative sex. That gives the simulation that can allow for either an orgasm or feel some level of connection. And maybe it's not penetrative if the vaginal canal is not accepting of that. Or maybe there's not an erectile dysfunction. There's plenty of toys. There's plenty of other devices, things that you can use that can simulate that or make that connection. And you can have that skin-to-skin contact or that ability to sexually and emotionally go through that process. So with solo sex, now that could mean for a lot of us, meaning that you don't always have to have that sexual partner. And I do find as we're aging and going through this aging process, sometimes we just don't desire to have a sexual partner. And sometimes the message is that, if we think about women, as we think earlier, we talked about being invisible in this process. Women are still finding self-pleasure even after menopause, or even after the society says that as you age, you're not having sex. Sexual pleasure, self-pleasure is still there. And so let's talk about that. Exploring self-pleasure without pressure. It is okay if you want to self-masturbate, you want to stimulate yourself, enjoy that orgasm, connect with that orgasm, regardless of what society says about older people not having it, not doing it. It's shameful. I can't think about my parents or grandparents or this older person that's in my life having an orgasm. Well, that's on them. This is about you. And so for your orgasm, you might find that with the vulva, that maybe you're not able to use a harder vibrator on the clitoris. Some vibrators, the stimulation is maybe too hard. You might have to find different ways to stimulate your clitoris and stimulate the vulva. Maybe with men with the erectile dysfunction, or maybe just men still wanting to find self-pleasure, there are plenty of toys that can allow for you to have self-pleasure. And I would encourage that. Finding ways to find new arousal and new arousal pacing, meaning that it may take a little bit more time for you to get aroused, and it may take more time for you to have an orgasm. And the caveat to that is that you may not have an orgasm. I know that when we were younger or kind of going through our virality in our life, orgasm is big, but there may be changes that may have caused the change in that. Maybe you had your prostate removed due to prostate cancer. Maybe there's some other experiences that you've had in life where you have desensitization. It's not actually experienced the same way. I would say think about other ways of like mindful touch. Again, thinking about the erogenous zones, removing orgasm as the goal and more about pleasure and experiencing that. And having these conversations with your partner and saying like, well, I may not have an orgasm, or it may take me longer to have an ejaculation. And I like to work through my pleasure. I like to work through these experiences, or, this kind of vibration, this kind of stimulation is painful for me. And I feel that pain in my body and I want to enjoy this. So let me talk about what's pleasurable to myself. I would say through the ability to have your own sexual stimulation and pleasure, you learn that more about your body. The more you learn about your body and what you can do and what you can't do, what you like and what you don't like, when you're actually with your sexual partner, you can explain that. But you may also find that with your sexual partner. So if you're with your sexual partner, yesterday you could do something, today you can't. Let them know that. Do not suffer in silence. Like I said before, if your body is telling you that's painful, then it's painful. Now, moving into body imaging and aging. Our bodies will continue to change, as we saw in the chat. It may be distribution of weight within our body, surgical scars, as we saw, that can come up for us as well. Our bodies will change with hair loss, skin changes, chronic illness. And what I would say to that is you're still beautiful. You're still here. You're still human. And that will continue to happen. That's just a natural part of our body. As you can see, I'm bald. I used to have hair. And with that, I started cutting my hair off and appreciating that, you know what, I just don't have hair. And I know that as I continue to age, more things will continue to change. And even for me, as I look in the mirror, I have to accept that what was a younger, youthful me is not as young and youthful anymore. And it will continue to be that way. And that is a moment of connecting with my body and understanding what I need to do for myself. And I would say continue to do that work for you all. If there's work that you feel like you need to do with who you are as you age, your body, loving it, respecting it, and or dealing with the grief that you have gone through, changes, hormonal changes, body changes, that really is the mental, social, emotional factors that can impact our libido. We do have to deal with that. And it's something that we may even be reminded from society, a partner, our own body, our own touch. I think when we reconnect with that or understand what it means for us, we're able to then move forward. If sex, there's penetration, well, libido seems diminished. I will say, as I said before, no. Penetrative sex, I find as I work with my older couples, is less about the goal, and sometimes we have to find alternatives, as I mentioned. So there's mutual touch, erotic massages. So there's something that we use in sex therapy called sensate focus. The idea of it is that we want to focus on the senses, focus on touch. That level of stimulation can be very important. And there are ways of having an orgasm without having penetrative sex. Would love to talk about that more, but at the same time, I would say just think about what you can do. There's tons of things to do without having penetration. But the other fun things that you can think about and have when you think about having a healthy libido and maintaining it is sensory play, role play, emotional intimacy. Also a reminder, pleasure is multidimensional. There's tons of places in our lives that we can get pleasure, and having pleasure with ourselves and with others, and thinking about within context, within reason, what that means for us. I want to note this, and I'll also mention we're going to come back in June and do a presentation about aging out loud. It's very important for us to talk about queer and diverse intersecting aging. Oftentimes it's not really focused on how much of it's an issue or how it can impact you, but I notice in sex therapy, I work with different couples and different individuals, and they talk about their lived experiences, social political issues, narratives, and intersecting identities. And these things can come up, particularly as you think about the arc of life, what may have been a younger experience and it wasn't as seen or readily an issue can become an issue as you become older. For an example, late life coming out. That can mean something totally different for somebody that's been in a heterosexual marriage and now they're coming out later in life and wanting to be on the dating scene. I will note that the landscape has changed. So for those that are coming and going back into the dating scene, looking for partnership, even if you're coming out later in life or not, a lot of the dating is happening online and on the apps. And I would say be safe as you do your online dating and dating on the apps. I've done several articles with Forbes and talking about this. There's a lot of folks that you can meet. That is a social place where you're connecting with others. But I would say also be careful, but also think about how you want to show up in those dating spaces and how you want to connect with others. But what I find is that coming out later in life or just redating at an older age, you might find that there are some folks that are very much like the young is in, and it's the it thing. And as you're maybe getting older, you're not seen as the more desirable. However, there is a caveat to that there are folks that are younger that are desiring an older person. The other, again, switching the scenarios, that society may say, well, that person's she's a cougar, or, that person's a daddy. And so this term of like, okay, you're seen in this fetish type of way, but the reality is you just want to connect like anybody else. You want pleasure just like anybody else. And sometimes you do desire a certain person and it's beyond the age and that concept of, they're of age, but then they're just not your age. Some other things that impact us as we age: minority stress, cultural silence in communities of color, religious sexual messaging, as we talked about earlier. I mentioned earlier, like how religion can be trauma, and even at an older age and within queer, diverse, intersecting identities, religion's still saying, well, it's a sin. And you might have come out of a religious context and feeling like you're still trying to navigate that within your older age. And what does that look like within your body? Erotic aging is not universal, it is contextual. And so there are so many different techniques, so many different communities out there. For an example, like BDSM, kink communities. And as you're aging, maybe you started off in those communities, maybe you're still in those communities, but how you're accepted in those communities, how you're treated. Maybe there are other communities of sexual communities that you want to be a part of. If that is your thing and you're looking for that, look for those communities that accept you, that are safe, and that understand your evolution. And I would say, have fun, have pleasure, and be safe. The cultural humility that needs to happen in this part is, again, our society really doesn't support sexual health in the context of aging. And when I say sexual health, I don't just mean like STI or looking at it as preventive. I think the way I look at sexual health is, how do I, from the gamut of pleasure to staying healthy sexually against STIs or any other viruses, and then also living with those things that may have happened throughout sexuality and sex and intimacy, that how do we age with being in an HIV treatment? How do we age with having a certain disease that's in our life, may it be chronic, and still accepting ourselves within our communities and finding ways of treatment, but still loving ourselves beyond that. We don't want to be silent or hidden in this process. you're still full of life and you're still wanting to find connection. So as we get ready to come to a close, this is just a small reflective exercise. I'm not going to ask you all to pop in the Q&A comment section unless you want to. This reflective part is I want you to think about, I've noticed my body feels differently lately. What does that mean for you? Like even for me, like, even my body is starting to feel different lately. And I'm starting to come to a point of I'm okay with that. I don't have the same energy. I don't get up the same. I can't get moving the same. I don't get the same pleasure or arousal that I used to. And being in connection with that makes me think, okay, how do I look at things differently? How do I connect with that differently? I'm curious about exploring something slower. All right, now, how's your partner with that? Maybe not your partner, but maybe yourself. Maybe you know that, hey, I masturbate this way, and I used to masturbate that way, but it causes more friction, or there's more chafing, or I'm not lubricating the same. How do I treat my body differently, or how do I take care of my body differently, and how do I make it move slower? Would you be open to trying? That's a really good question. Asking yourself that, because start with yourself, because you might find that your mind is not as open to trying different things. But also, if you have sexual partners or a sexual partner, or that could be a sexual partner in a romantic monogamous situation, asking them, are you open to trying? And not just open to trying like, hey, I have this pain or life is changing, but maybe you're exploring other sexual pleasure and you want to try rope bondage, or maybe you want to try some kink or BDSM, or maybe you've been exploring something, or maybe it's even watching some pornography. I would say, be open to what that is. So avoid blame, withdrawal, and mind reading. You don't know what your partner may be thinking. They may not be judging you, or they may be feeling some kind of way. Get into conversation, get into communication, get into sharing and exploring what that looks like, and be vulnerable with the person that you feel like you can be vulnerable. The first person that is really yourself. When we do that vulnerability and that kind of work, it really does help. The last couple of things I would say is normalize support. Hormone therapy, pelvic floor therapy, as I mentioned before, couples therapy, big on sex therapy, cardiovascular care, medication review. Like as we age and we have these medical professionals in our life, professionals, talk to them. Talk to your therapist about it. Talk to your medical practitioner. Talk to whoever's in your life. And I know society wants to kind of close our mouth about having sexual conversations, or sometimes it's difficult to navigate that. What I find is when you just open and you're out there and you're talking about it and you're being honest, it is a major liberation. That is what we have to do. We have to liberate our minds and liberate ourselves to realize that we have to reframe our libido after 50. Take control of that in the medical model. Take control of it within your relationships. Take control of it within your mind and within yourself. There are so many things that do happen as we age around sexual health, but there's some things that we also have to be careful about and think about. Yes, there's ideas of like, hey, it's less about pregnancy. Yeah, menopause, changing in life, maybe how we ejaculate and how we're able to put the sperm towards the egg. However, still being mindful that penetrative sex in any kind of format, in many ways, you need to be protected. And we talk about, or you've heard about how increasing levels of STI in aging populations, be careful, regardless if you can procreate, you need to be safe. But if you want to have sex, have pleasure, have it. But just how you go about it. Emotionally safety, psychological safety, physical safety, all those things are important. At this point, we have great self-knowledge. We know about boundaries. If you don't feel like you have those, re-examine the boundaries. Reduce people pleasing. If you just don't want to do that with that person, you're not into it, just don't do it anymore. We're more intentional about pleasure, deeper orgasms because the mind is more connected with the body, more intentional about intimacy, and greater authenticity. I would say this. What belief about aging and sex are you still ready to release? That's an important question. May not be in the Q&A comment section, but what are you ready to release to actually address that? Are you thinking about it? What possibility feels exciting? After here, or even beyond here, maybe it's a day later or a year later, what is the possibility of feeling excited about pleasure, sex, intimacy, your body, where you're at now in life? And what belief about aging and sex are you ready to release? So I'm going to stop here and say thank you all for this process and this presentation. I look forward to if there's Q&A, but I look forward for you all to answer that question to yourself. What are you ready to release about what we hold, these boundaries and these fears and these traumas, so that we can enjoy sex and pleasure at the ages that we're in? Thank you all.
This has been absolutely wonderful, Dr. Span. You have given us some very practical ideas. You've been very, very creative. I think the one thing that I'm sensing from some of the questions that have been written in the Q&A is just if there are any other really practical things. I think people are looking almost for, what are some daily habits that can support healthy desire? I think people want to feel healthy desire once again, but they're not quite sure what to do, or maybe they even have some trepidation on, what if I suggest this and my partner says, oh no. But how do you, number one, we have a number of people that have indicated that they have lost a spouse and that they are now entering a whole new arena. There have been people that are divorced, and again, so I think whenever anyone is trying to enter a new type relationship, do something new, I think I know we're all different human beings, but are there some more practical takeaways or maybe some daily habits that can really support healthy desire and maybe increasing our desire?
Yeah, 100%. And, first thing that comes to mind is giving yourself some grace. You're changing from maybe a relationship status, a marital status, or an ability. And so when we think about pleasure and we think about sex, whatever may be coming to mind, even romantic, intimate relationships, it really does first start with our mental ability, our ability to think through things clearly and to respect ourselves or love through it. And so as a sex therapist, folks think sex therapy is really about like, oh, we're going to talk about like erectile dysfunction, or we're going to talk about how you're not having your best sex. I often find that as a sex therapist, I do a lot of social emotional conversations first. It really is working through where are you holding maybe that trauma, that loss of a spouse? Where are you holding conversations or space for yourself when you've gone through a divorce? And what I find is that we want to move through that and then kind of get to where we're ready and we're ready to get out there, date, and play the field. Maybe you are, and maybe you're not. And so if you find that you still are working through a lot of the social emotional or the loss of that relationship, as a therapist, I'm always going to encourage you should talk to somebody, because you might be grieving through something that you may have not totally worked on. And so as I mentioned grief, as I mentioned trauma, divorce is a major change and shift in life. Losing a partner, regardless of the length of time, is a major change and a loss in life. I encourage that. Talk to somebody about that. Work through those spaces, because you might be moving into other parts of your life that maybe you truly haven't done the work just yet. And so as I talked about turning the ons and the offs, maybe there's still a part of you where you have sexual partners, but you're still thinking about your previous partner. Maybe you're still thinking about how I had a great partner, great sex life, great romantic life, and now I'm still dealing with the loss. And so regardless of any age, seek support, seek therapy. I know there's other information out there or medical situations that you can have, like you could still get an erection by using erection medication. But if your mind is still hasn't done with the trauma and deal with the emotional loss, that is a part of your body that we need to work on. And I would say get support about that. I will say this last caveat about desire. You sometimes have to reconnect with what desire is. So what you might have used to do and maybe was desirable for you or made you feel desire is not the case anymore. I would say do an inventory. As I talked about self-pleasure, you might find that what I like now as stimulation maybe wasn't exactly what I would do. Maybe I do like nipple play. Maybe I do have other erogenous zones on my body. Maybe I do have to watch pornography. Maybe I do have to have some kind of different type of sex that may be stimulating a part of my body that I never thought I could stimulate, and I'm proud of that. Maybe there's some kinks that I explore. But the way to do that is you have to just see what's out there and what you like and what you don't like. And through that, you might find that I have now a higher arousal around this part of play or this part of my body that I didn't think I had before. Or I thought that was going to be fun. I've heard about it on 50 Shades of Grey. And you know what? I don't like to be spanked. I'm not open to that. I tried it. And so I would say go out there and play, have fun, do things that are within safe reason, those that things that you feel appropriate for your life. But you do have to get out there and explore. And maybe you explore that with a sex therapist, or maybe you explore that with communities that can find and hold space with you.
Thank you for sharing that. You just mentioned finding a sex therapist, and I can just imagine that that's daunting for many on the call. But how do you advise one goes about finding a good sex therapist?
I think there's a couple of places to go. And so there's major organizations. We just saw that a major organization, talking about the American Association for Sex, American Sexual Health Association, or if we're looking for the American Association for Sex Educators and Therapists, you may find that there's these larger organizational bodies that actually support where they have directories of sex therapists that may be in your state. You might also find that there's other directories that may be able to help. And there are some larger companies that are out there that like Talkspace, BetterHelp. But you might find also like Psychology Today has places where you can look up sex therapists. But I would say if you are searching, in your search, also see, do they focus on certain things that you may be interested in? Maybe there is something around having queer sexuality. That's very important for you. Maybe there's kink and BDSM that you're dealing with. Maybe there's some trauma that you've had over your lifespan around sex and sexual health. Maybe you're working with your partner right now, and so you're looking for a sex therapist that does more work with couples and helping through vaginismus or any kind of pain or erectile dysfunction, or how to find different ways to have sexual play. As you find that there's these large organizations, once you find that therapist, ask questions, look at their background, see if that works for you, and then I would say be as honest as possible on what you're trying to work on and see what are the things that come up around the treatment.
Thank you. And if you would, you mentioned this, but if you could perhaps reiterate this for our audience, when should someone seek professional help for concerns about libido?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And as a therapist, I'm going to say that as you look at when you feel like things should be happening in your life, there's this kind of idea, and that I want to hopefully broaden this so that it gets more people into therapy. I would say even if you feel like you have a good libido, go to therapy, talk to a sex therapist about it, because you might find that in that there may be some awakening about maybe how to continue to keep a healthy libido, maybe how to address maybe where you feel like there's some changes on how you desire and want to maintain that. Then there's also this other caveat where you're starting to notice that, okay, I'm having some changes in my arousal and desire. I'm having changes on how I connect with pleasure and intimacy. That is where, if you're finding that you're not really connected to your arousal and desire, you're finding that you're having challenges with finding ways to maintain erection, emoting to the other person, you're finding challenges with desire, and these things were pretty consistent and normal in your life, and you're dealing with shame, guilt, depression, anxiety, those are the opportunity for you to then talk to a sex therapist. But I would say even before it even gets to that, I would say why not just check in and have some sessions with a sex therapist and do some exploration. And you might find that just as you share and open up, you're going to find other areas that you never thought were probably conversations that you wanted to have that maybe your parents never had with you. Maybe you never had it with your partner. Maybe this is the first time that you've had this kind of conversation with another person in your life, and they hold that space with you, and you're like, yeah, I'm actually talking about things that I've always wanted to talk about, but I never did, and this person gets me.
Thank you. You've spoken about this, but I think it's always helpful to kind of touch it again. I mean, we're all getting older. You mentioned body image changes. We're all having changes in our body image. But I guess I'm focusing on, the set shifts that we have to have. But what do you suggest? How do we really rebuild sexual confidence after illness, after body image changes, after a loss? I mean, because I think that is what some people, what I'm sensing from the questions, are feeling right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think as we talk about that loss or the change or the transition in our bodies, I believe there is a place of acknowledgement, awareness, acceptance, and then also dealing with what may be a grieving process. And so as there is, maybe our body does not have the capability, maybe our mind, as our mind even goes through its own experiences of being able to fully connect with certain places of sensory touch, maybe even being able to hold that capacity as our mind can change, or even our body. I think that's where we have to work with maybe a therapist, sex therapist, or maybe even that's just work we do with ourselves. As I was saying before, maybe due to knee surgery, maybe certain positions aren't the positions that I can do anymore. Maybe after having back surgery, or maybe seeing myself differently after losing a limb or going through an accident or experiencing type 2 diabetes, there might be these changes in our bodies that happen. The other thing I could say is just know that even with those changes in your body, there's still places that you can feel sensual touch, still feel connected. And just like how sometimes we have to shift where we have changes in our life and still being able to perform our duties or other parts of our life without having certain limbs or having certain abilities, that can happen still sexually in pleasure. We might find that our main way of having sexual pleasure was penetration. And you might find that through erectile dysfunction, vaginismus, pelvic floor plane, changes in the vulva, that's not the way that you're going to have sex, at least for now. And I think what happens there is we feel this sense of loss and that sex is not a part of our process anymore. But the context of that is sex is not just penetrative. There's other ways to still feel connected, and maybe you don't have an orgasm, but orgasm isn't always the goal. Although we're taught that and we experience that very early in life, that that's the way that you're going to have sex, and that means that you've had great sex because you had an orgasm, but that's not always the case. And so as we realize and come to understanding where our body's at, and then think about how do we still enjoy pleasure with what we have, we then can find those things. And so as I mentioned before, it could be toys. It could be sensual touch. It could be enjoying the simple things in life that allow for us to feel sensory connection, emotional connection. And we may have to lean into that because what was may never come back. And so the more we practice and work on what we have and how it's given to us with the bodies as it continues to change, or the mind as it continues to change, we then come to an acceptance and enjoy what we do have so that we focus on that and less of the loss.
Thank you. There was a question in the chat that I didn't touch on. An 80-year-old man just basically asked a biological question. At what age is it unreasonable to really expect an ejaculation?
That's definitely more of like a medical model question where one, the body does seem to be different for each person. So thinking about an exact age of like saying like expectation for an ejaculation, I believe that is definitely more medical. And I wouldn't be able to say like for on average that this is it. But I definitely appreciate the question because I do find that for men, particularly ejaculation is something that's very important, and feeling like the ejaculatory experience says that, okay, we've enjoyed sex. I would say that as we age and that there may be a point in life where we don't have an ejaculation or an orgasm in that manner, that may be to removing the prostate, that might be that you're just not able to ejaculate anymore. I would say the orgasm is actually mental. There is a stimulated experience that happens within your body that can just be just as pleasurable. Oftentimes when we think about the ejaculation and seeing, if you will, just the sperm, there's this identity, particularly for men, that, okay, we still have this virality. There's still a connection to that. And so oftentimes there's a pairing and feeling like I'm still able to perform and to produce sperm and that this is very important. But I find what is actually just as important or not more important is the orgasm and how you're able to still have that orgasm and connect to that.
Well, this has all been very, very great news for all of us. I'm glad you also mentioned that you are going to be joining us next quarter. Dr. Span is going to be speaking about aging out loud on June 17th. It's our Pride Month conversation celebrating queer aging as a time of visibility, connection, and possibility. So we're certainly looking forward to welcoming you back, later on this spring. On behalf of my team and on behalf of all of the attendees, I just want to say thank you so much. You have truly enlightened us. You have given us a lot to think about. I really, appreciate you putting information in the Q&A to make us a little more reflective right now, and to realize that this is so individualized, and so much of it has to start with us. And so just thank you for sharing all of the information, giving us a lot to think about. And I just at this point want to bring our conference, to a close. And you certainly have been so helpful in bringing this to a nice close. I want to give a special thank you again to our speakers, Fred Wyan, Dr. Nadia Serdar, and Dr. Rufus Span. We are so grateful that all of you could be here today. And as I said before, we have put a QR code on the screen. If there is anyone that is interested in making a donation to the Sibley Foundation to support the programs of the Sibley Senior Association, you can certainly scan that QR code for more information. And I want to end again by giving thanks to our sponsors, because were it not for your support, the Sibley Senior Association would not be able to do much of what they do. And I'm going to read one more time our patron sponsors as well as our supporter sponsors. But before I do that, I just really want to thank everyone who joined us today. Yes, this was a recorded session. I will be sending you a link to the recording. We will be sharing the slides of our presenters, so there's a lot to look forward to. I want to go ahead and also just say that you can always reach out to the Sibley Senior Association by calling us 202 364 7602. We also offer our phone number on every page of our Sibley Senior Association quarterly newsletter. Also, SSA members also receive printed copies of the newsletter in the mail. But we hope to see you on the screen via Zoom for some of the other great programs that we have planned, and many are listed on the back page of your program booklet. So on behalf of the entire Community Health and Sibley Association team, I want to say again, thank you to all of our speakers, and thank you to all of our sponsors. And again, let me call special attention to our patron sponsors, Aging Well Elder Care and Co-Investment Company, Elder Care Management Services, Goodwin Living at Home, Grand Oaks Assisted Living, Ingleside, Inspire, Embassy Row, Seabury Resources for Aging, Silver Bridges Consulting, Sunrise Senior Living, Support for Aging, the Fitzgerald of Palisades, the Residences at Thomas Circle, and our supporter sponsors are Bright Star, Family and Nursing Care, Georgetown Home Care, Home Instead Senior Care, Kensington Bethesda, Seniors Helping Seniors, and Smith Life Home Care. Thank you again, everyone, for participating this afternoon. Our blessings to you. Be safe. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you so much.